Morning, everybody. It's 7 o'clock. Coming up on today's programme for you. Will inflation finally fall below Bank of England's 2% target? We're about to find out.
Plus, tax rises or spending cuts. How the Chancellor plans to fill a £40 billion black hole.
And why some diamonds are not forever for Dame Shirley Bassey.
It's Wednesday, the 16th of October. The US gives Israel a 30-day deadline to boost aid into Gaza, or it will cut military assistance. There have been a series of Israeli airstrikes on Beirut this morning, the first in 5 days. We'll have the latest live. A warning about the desperate state of end-of-life care on a landmark day for assisted dying laws in Parliament. When Starmer met Swift, new details emerge as Downing Street denies the tickets were a thank you for security.
We may be poor and black, but that doesn't mean we're stupid.
We report on the battle for black votes in Detroit as Georgia reports record turnout in early voting. And a German coach for the England team, Thomas Tuchel, to be unveiled later at Wembley. Bringing the very latest on inflation figures, 1.7%.
Inflation has fallen in September, in the months of September, to 1.7%.
Let's just rejoice at that news.
Well, indeed. It's down
somebody
from,
famous once said.
It's down from 2.2%, so significant fall. And it's below the Bank of England's target rate of 2% for the first time since April 2021. We think of the big inflation spike up to more than 11% has been driven by the war in Ukraine. But inflation started marching up after COVID restrictions eased, supply chains made things more expensive. So it's good news for consumers. It's good news for the Governor of the Bank of England. I'm not able to
know about underlying inflation, don't
Indeed,
we,
I'm not able to get into the Office for National Statistics underlying analysis here, so I haven't got that number. I'll just double check. Yes, we have core inflation, which is exactly the other number the bank will be looking at, and that's often has been recently driven by services inflation. So that's the inflation that's got stuck since things like fuel prices have declined. That's still at 3.2%, but that's another decline, if I've got that right. So ahead of the Bank of England's decision next month, which was already the markets put an 80% chance of an interest rate cut, I would anticipate that number is only going to increase, and it's going to look close to nailed on that interest rates will come down at the next meeting, which is doubly good news for consumers. And there's good news in there for the Chancellor as well, as she's pondering a budget. One of the numbers that's been really troubling has been the amount of debt interest the government's had to pay as rates fall.
That's just go up again, isn't it? Because
by the end of the, it should be said, the bank's forecast and most independent forecasts at this rate will increase again as the year goes on, but we will be within the vicinity of the 2% mark. And being under the, should say, for the economists, being under the 2% mark by 0.3% shouldn't really be much different to being over it by 0.3%. They want to be in the region of that target because having it too low isn't good either. But this is larger than was expected, driven by fuel prices primarily. They don't just affect us at the pump, they affect transport costs, they feed through the entire economy. So it's good news, and it's more than the economists were expecting.
And when you were talking about underlying rate, that's still up at just over 3%. What about food prices and the like? Food
prices have started to fall.
Not go up as quickly?
Well, they've actually started to fall. There was deflation in some food prices.
Oh, excellent. Tell us more.
Well, over the last couple of months, we've just seen a retreat in those astronomically high impacts. Again, much of it comes back to Ukraine. Cereal prices, which feed into the price of oils as well as cereals, they've started to back off. So this number, 1.7% in the headline rate of inflation. Prices are still rising, just by not as much, but there's been some deflation in food. It doesn't feel like it, does it? When we had shop, when it doesn't. But there has been a bit of a backing off. So some of those, the frontline effects of inflation, food, fuels, the volatile commodities have started to recede and back off. What the Bank of England has been worried about, and that core inflation number, is the inflationary costs that have got stuck in the economy, particularly through wage growth. Now, wages, we had numbers yesterday on wage inflation just below 5%. So wage inflation is falling. So employers are facing not quite as much pressure to keep wages high. And of course, that means they're rising in real terms against this inflation number because they are bigger. Of course, employers are all sitting there wondering, in 2 weeks today, I think it is 2 weeks today, they'll be finding out whether the cost of employing people is going to get higher again because the Chancellor wants to put up national insurance. We'll get a chance to ask the Chief Secretary to the Treasury about all of this in the next few minutes, and we'll let you know in the 8.
Oh, excellent. Thank you very much. Thanks, Paul. Meantime, a series of Israeli airstrikes have hit Beirut this morning, the first such strikes in 5 days. It comes as the United States gives Israel 30 days to improve the humanitarian situation in Gaza or risk losing US military assistance. Let's get more on that, should we? Our Middle East correspondent, Alistair Bunkle, joining us now from Jerusalem. Hello to you, Alistair. So what have we heard from the US? What are they threatening and why is it 30 days?
Well, the US has written a letter to senior Israeli officials. The Americans say that this letter was never supposed to be made public, but they have now confirmed its existence now that it is in the public domain. And actually, the State Department perhaps hinted last night that it was leaked by the Israelis, but it is a very stern letter criticising almost all aspects of Israel's control over humanitarian aid going into Gaza and giving them this 30-day warning. I'll read out a passage of it. They say that we are particularly concerned that recent actions by the Israeli government, including halting commercial imports, denying or impeding nearly 90% of humanitarian movements between northern and southern Gaza in September, continuing burdensome and excessive dual-use restrictions, and instituting new vetting and onerous liability and customs requirements for humanitarian staff and shipments, together with increased lawlessness and looting, are contributing to an accelerated deterioration in the conditions in Gaza. So there you go, as I said, highly critical of so many aspects of what Israel is or isn't doing to allow aid into Gaza. So they've given them this 30-day deadline, and they say that they are also bound by law in the US not to supply weapons to a country that might not be abiding by international law when it comes to humanitarian situations like this. So that is the threat. But there's two things I'd say about it. A lot of people will say, why has it taken until now to issue this threat? And secondly, what have you got in the next 30 days? A US presidential election. And if Trump wins that, then I think Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, will think that he has a more favourable US president in the White House.
OK, and we've been learning more, haven't we, Alistair, about some of those that were killed in the Israeli airstrike on the hospital in Gaza?
Well, airstrikes in Gaza are continuing every day, but on Sunday night there was an airstrike on Al-Aqsa Hospital in central Gaza, where a lot of people had been seeking shelter in the hospital grounds and in the hospital car park, living in tents. It's at least the 6th time we understand from our data and forensics team at Sky News that the hospital has been hit over the past year. 4 people were killed in an inferno that ripped through the tents. One of them, a young man called Saban, and we have been looking at who he was and how it was that he came to die on Sunday night. In a different place, in a different time, Shaban would have had a bright future ahead of him. But Shaban was born in Gaza, where people now measure their futures in hours and days.
Hello, I'm Shaban from Palestine. I'm a student studying computer system engineer.
When the war started, he left home in Gaza and built this tent for his family in the grounds of Al-Aqsa Hospital.
I'm taking care of my family as I'm the oldest. I have 2 sisters and 2 little brothers and my parents. We live in a very hard circumstances, suffering from various things such as homelessness and limited food and extremely limited medicine. We are in the blood bank.
Later that day, he donated blood to help the wounded in Gaza. Shaban continued to study in his tent, but walked for half an hour each day just to get internet access. He set up a GoFundMe page to raise money to take his family to Egypt, to safety. Then, 10 days ago, he was injured in an Israeli strike while sleeping in a mosque. Shaban was still recovering when another Israeli airstrike hit the hospital grounds on Sunday night and his tent caught alight. His mother, Ala, was also trapped and died next to her son in the inferno.
Shaban was on fire. My father was busy with my younger brother, so I couldn't help but run towards Shaban to try to help him. People stopped me from getting close to the danger, saying the civil defense was on its way to put the fire out. I kept saying, "But my brother's on fire, my brother's on fire. Please let me go." They wouldn't let me. My brother was burning in front of my eyes, and I couldn't do anything to help him. It's an indescribable feeling. No one in the world can understand it. Can you imagine seeing your loved ones die in front of you? Your brother, your role model in life, your mother, your rock and caretaker.
The Israeli military said it hit a Hamas command center. As yet, they've shown no evidence of that. They've also said that the fire was started by secondary explosions in the hospital car park. It is one theory.
It was a painful scene. It's hard. I saw my cousin and my uncle's wife both on fire. They were moving around trying to stop it. I really don't understand what we did to deserve this. We're displaced families. What did we do wrong?
Shaban's final months were spent hiding from the fighting in a place where there is now nowhere to hide. In life, he had dreamt of memorizing the Quran and becoming a computer scientist. In death, he has become another figure in an unfathomable number, 42,000, the Gaza dead. Shaban was 19. He would have turned 20 today. Alistair Bunkle, Sky News, in Jerusalem.
And a reminder that the new episode of the World Podcast with Richard and Yalda will be released at lunchtime today. You can scan the QR code on the screen to start downloading it. As always, you can listen wherever you get your podcasts. Ali is here with us. Good morning to you. Keir Starmer. I don't know where to go with this story. Why don't they just get ahead of it?
I think that's a big part of the problem, Kay. It's been sort of the drip. Has the communications around this been properly managed? I think that's part of the reason we've had this big reset. But look, the latest details are that Keir Starmer did meet with Taylor Swift. He met with Taylor Swift and her mother. It was called a brush by. I'm not entirely sure what that means. About 10 minutes.
With his wife and their children.
Yes, so the whole
and it
family.
happened after somebody within number 10 had green lighted the blue lights.
Yeah, that's right. So she got this enhanced police escort, and that wasn't something necessarily that the Met Police wanted, but that they came round to after the government pushed for it. I should say, that police escort did come after she had to pull out of a gig in Austria over a terror threat. The government say that it was declared and he then paid for it. But look, it sort of breaks that general rule, doesn't it, that you shouldn't accept hospitality from people that you're making decisions about. And as I say, I think the thing that's angered Labour MPs I've spoken to is the way that communications have been handled. And you've got 3 of the front pages from across the spectrum, The Guardian, The Sun, The Times, with this on their front page.
And the Mail.
Yeah, and the Mail, that's right. So you've got this across the front pages. It is still having an impact.
And what does Downing Street say?
Downing Street say that he paid for the tickets, that it was properly declared. They refute any kind of accusations of hypocrisy, because that's been one thing, because they obviously went very hard on the Conservatives. But as I say, there has been pressure on them over did he meet Taylor Swift, which cabinet ministers attended, which concerts, and it has been a drip rather than getting all the information out at once, and that I think has made it all more painful, Kay.
Surely there can't be much more coming out.
Well, we'll see.
He went twice. They decided to change the rules, even though the Met Police were aware of what had happened in Vienna, but still decided that the risk was not great, and even if it was, they could deal with it. It was overruled on some level. Then, a couple of days later, not only did he go and accept hospitality from the record label, he then also went backstage to meet with his family to meet Taylor Swift and her mum.
OK, I'm sure if you're asking the questions, there's going to be more on this.
You know what? Labour's pulled out this morning. Who would have thought that?
Interesting.
I know, I was surprised.
Coincidental.
Yes, totally.
Totally. Let's bring some of the day's other stories, shall we?
Please.
Start with the NHS. Workers there will now be able to anonymously report incidents of sexual misconduct in changes to protect the safety of staff. It follows a Sky News investigation which uncovered widespread sexual harassment and violence against female paramedics. NHS bosses say the problem exists across the entire health service, but they're determined to tackle it.
Well, I really hope that all of the measures that we have announced today gives people confidence that we are taking these awful behaviours and assaults seriously, and that we want people to come forward. They will be supported, they will be believed, and they will be heard.
An aeroplane nut ban announcement is unlikely to be effective, may even give people a false sense of security. That's according to experts. The aviation medical consultancy says flyers shouldn't worry about allergens in the air conditioning systems of aircraft. Instead, people flying with nut allergies should ask to board first so they can thoroughly clean their seat and area instead. Former Chief of the General Staff, General Sir Mike Jackson, has died at the age of 80. During his time, he led the British Army during the Allied invasion of Iraq in 2003, after serving in both Northern Ireland and Bosnia. The father of three, also dubbed the Prince of Darkness, owing to his gravelly voice and uncompromising style. The United States has welcomed two new giant pandas which have arrived from China in what's known as panda diplomacy. The pandas, known as Bai Li and King Bao, left a research facility in southwestern China and have arrived at the Smithsonian's National Zoo on a FedEx special transport project known as the Panda Express. It's part of a new 10-year conservation agreement with the Chinese authorities. Bao and King will remain in quarantine for at least a month, and then the public will have the opportunity to see them from January.
And I think twin pandas go on display in Berlin Zoo as well today.
That's fun.
Love a panda.
Love a panda.
Today is a landmark day in the path towards legalised assisted dying. Let's get more, should we? Ashish is here with us. This did go to a vote previously, and MPs decided no. What's happening now?
What is happening now is it's being introduced into Parliament by Kim Leadbeater, who says she wants an open discussion and an open debate about assisted dying. This has been coming for some time. There is momentum behind a change in the law. We didn't expect it to happen as quickly as it is. It was announced last week, first introduction today, and a vote and a debate at the end of November. But before we talk about assisted dying, the country needs to talk about the palliative care system that exists in this country, and that's according to patients and staff who work in the end-of-life system at the moment, especially hospices, which are under enormous pressure. One closed its doors just over a week ago. Palliative care doctors are really worried about the impact assisted dying, legalising assisted dying, will have on the existing end-of-life care system in this country. I spent a day with patients and staff at a hospice in South East London. These are some of their stories.
Hi, Tim.
Tim was given just a few months to live. That was 3.5 years ago.
Tim.
Born with learning disabilities, he later developed cancer, and it kept returning.
Be there. Hello, Tim. It's lovely to see you.
But despite being very sick, Tim can live at home with mum Valerie because of support from his palliative care nurse, Phoebe.
This is Joe. It's really sad to see him deteriorate, particularly because when I first started seeing him, you know, he was independently mobile in his wheelchair. He would take lots of videos. He'd be super, super chatty. I'm not going to lie, I do cry quite a lot at work. Yeah, I think you're a human.
Which flavour would you like?
Valerie is 82, and naturally, she's worried about the future.
I think if you speak to any parent of a child with learning disabilities, well, all those that I have known have said, I would like my child to die before me, because we've seen so many go into care, lovely people there looking after them, but then you go back a few months later, those lovely people have gone and there's somebody else there.
Would you be able to cope without
the palliative care you receive?
I couldn't do this without them.
Breathing.
The quality of the country's end-of-life care system is being questioned as MPs consider legalising assisted dying. St Christopher's Hospice, where Phoebe works, neither supports or opposes a change in the law. But the hospice sector is a strong and important voice in that debate.
We've got hospices who are cutting back their services already, making frontline staff redundant because they're no longer able to fund those services. And so whether or not assisted dying is introduced by this government, we must fix the end-of-life care system in the UK.
Her catheter bag would be full of blood and they wouldn't come out.
Linda has experienced the best and worst of end-of-life care. Her mother died peacefully and comfortably at a Marie Curie hospice. But her Aunt Mary chose to die at home.
We had to buy her incontinence pads. We had to buy different creams because the deliveries weren't regular. We had to chase everyone for everything. And it's just so tiring all the time having to fight.
In the UK, we don't talk about death enough. But now, that conversation is being forced on us. And it could be one of the most important ones we ever have in our lives. Ashish Joshi, Sky News.
And you can see more of Ashish's special report on end-of-life care on the UK Tonight at 8 p.m, or you can scan the QR code to watch it now. You can also catch it throughout the day here on Sky News. Inflation is down. We heard that in the last few minutes. It's down to 1.7%, falling below the Bank of England target of 2%. Tom Selby, Director of Public Policy at AJ Bell, is with us. Hi, Tom.
Morning.
It's good to see you. As expected?
Slightly below what the market was expecting. So the market was pricing in about a reduction to 1.9% from 2.2%. So 20 basis points below that. I think that probably brings us a hair closer to an interest rate cut from the Bank of England. They want to see the data as it comes through. But with inflation now below the target for the first time actually since 2021, I think there'll be concern on Threadneedle Street to make sure that inflation doesn't drop too low, too far away from that 2% target that they're aiming for.
And one of the reasons for that, I believe, is lower petrol prices, but it does look as though potentially fuel duty is in the crosshairs for the budget.
Yes, so that could impact on where things move from here, clearly. I think we've seen petrol prices go up significantly for lots of people recently, so I think people just driving less, or that'll be driving down the impact that has on inflation. Obviously, lots of rumour and speculation about what may or may not be in the budget. Fuel duty is certainly one of the things that the Chancellor could have her eye on. OK, what else? A gambling tax I was reading about yesterday. A gambling tax, I think certainly there's a lot of focus in and around what they could do to businesses. I think that the Chancellor's got herself in a bit of a bind in terms of committing not to increase rates of income tax, national insurance and VAT. For workers, promising wealth creation and also promising to prioritise economic growth. That doesn't leave a lot of room for manoeuvre to do things that don't go against those pledges, but I think a focus on the taxes that businesses pay, so possibly national insurance on pension contributions, those are the kind of things that could raise the kind of money that the Chancellor's talking about here, because 22 billion, possibly more than that, based on what we're reading in today's papers, is going to require some pretty big changes.
Yes. OK. Paul Johnson, IFS, I think, was saying that Institute for Fiscal Studies saying that £16 billion is what could be raised by a 1% increase on national insurance for employers. That's going to go quite a long way to filling that hole.
It would go quite a long way to filling that hole, but there would be consequences. There's consequences to any decision. I think we've been seeing people debating that in the last few days. So if you increase the cost on businesses, it might not sound like a lot, but that business will take a decision about how much it's going to pay people, about the pensions it's going to give its staff, about the prices it's going to charge ordinary people who are buying their goods and services. So I think it's that pledge from the government not to hit working people that's really coming to buy it here, because any change you make, whether it's to a business or to an individual, is going to have a knock-on impact on working people, whether that's directly by increasing their taxes or indirectly by increasing the cost of the stuff they buy or suppressing their wages over the long term.
And what about when we've gone inheritance tax thresholds?
Inheritance tax is one that's perennially, apparently, in the crosshairs of the Treasury. IHT paid by only about 4% of households. But I think it's one of those taxes.
Why do we care about it so much if it's so few people are impacted?
It's an incredibly emotional thing, I think, for a lot of people. I think for a lot of...
Is it an aspirational thing?
It's an aspirational thing for a lot of people. I know when I speak to my parents and people in my parents' generation, they're not going to be hit by IHT, but they feel quite passionately, actually, that they should be able to pass on a decent chunk of their money tax-free to their beneficiaries. And I think that makes
it...
and I think that makes it quite a difficult thing for the government to do anything on. It wouldn't necessarily raise a lot of money immediately either, which is the big challenge facing the Chancellor. But when you look at the things that she could do that wouldn't break those promises, looking at IHT is something which kind of fits the bill but might not raise loads of money immediately is the challenge.
Okay. But what she is hoping is that interest rates will come down next month, beginning of next month, and potentially another one before the end of the year. What's that going to mean for people's mortgages? Because it doesn't always happen straight away, does it?
It doesn't always happen straight away, but sometimes actually we see rates come down before we get those announcements, because the expectation of the market, of mortgage lenders, is that interest rates will drop, and so they'll adjust their rates accordingly. You'd expect that to happen if the market's competitive, certainly. So if we do see interest rates come down, and it's increasingly likely that we're going to see that, certainly at the next Monetary Policy Committee meeting of the Bank of England, that will be good news for people who are on variable rate mortgages, so mortgages that track the Bank of England base rate. If the Bank of England base rate comes down, then the amount that they pay each month will come down as well. For new home buyers who are looking to get a mortgage, they might be able to get a mortgage at a lower rate, so that's good news for them as well, potentially. Less good news for people who've got cash savings. So we've seen cash savings rates of 5% plus have been really common recently, something that we hadn't seen at all since 2008, 2009 has really come back into the market. But if we see Bank of England base rate coming down, interest rate expectations coming down, then we'll see those rates on cash savings coming down as well.
Fascinating stuff, Tom. Let's see what happens before the end of the year, and more importantly, in a couple of weeks' time with that budget. Good to see you. Thank you. First Labour budget for what, 15 years? Still to come on The Breakfast Show for you. England have a new men's team manager, and he's a German. But is Thomas Tuchel a winner? And as Trump and Harris make their pitch to key swing voters in Michigan, we travel to Detroit.
I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent.
An enormous explosion that's just come down. I think it was a monster just landed in between us.
Hundreds and hundreds of people hoping to get north, ultimately to get to the United States.
It's a border where they're not welcome, yet they keep coming.
We saw snatch squads going in, grabbing people, taking them out and putting them into trucks, but taking them away.
They make about 50 kilos of fentanyl a week. It's incredibly dangerous and toxic stuff.
There's been an upsurge in deaths. The fighting between the gangs is getting more and more vicious.
Is this now all your territory?
Yeah.
The battlefield is outside the barricades, which is over there. This is much more like a normal town.
It's really sending a clear message that Venezuela is eager for change.
We've been crushed. Free from wherever you get your news. We are in the middle of a forest, in a jungle really, and they're attempting to keep these men alive. This is real, hardcore emergency medicine. The information on this could bring down the entire network, not just in Iraq and Syria, but across the world. Sky News, the full story first.
Well, hundreds of thousands of people have been using the beast for years to traverse Mexico, but it is really dangerous. Many people have died riding it.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Heavy vehicle.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
You want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
Welcome back to the breakfast show. You weren't expecting that, were you? Here on Sky News, coming up just under 3 weeks to the US election. We'll be speaking to the former White House Director of Comms, Anthony Scaramucci. In answer to your question, he was one of the people that was at the Rest is Politics last night at the O2 with Alistair Campbell and Rory Stewart, and Catty Kay was there as well. But he's going to be coming on to talk to us about what's going to happen in the next few weeks.
And his insights from that time in the White House, eh?
Well, very short time.
Very short time, but torrid and turbulent time.
Indeed so. It's sometimes like that here, isn't it? What have you got for us?
Our top stories for you this morning. UK inflation has dropped to 1.7% in September, down 0.5% from August, the first time the rate has fallen below the 2% target set by the Bank of England in over 3 years. The fall much bigger than expected. A series of Israeli airstrikes have hit Beirut this morning, the first such strikes in 5 days. It comes as the United States has given Israel 30 days to improve the humanitarian situation in Gaza or risk losing US military assistance. Members of Parliament will be considering a bill on assisted dying in the House of Commons later today. Charities warn that end-of-life care should be fixed before any legislation is considered. And Thomas Tuchel will hold a news conference at Wembley at 1:30 today after agreeing an 18-month deal to become the new England men's football manager.
Let's talk about that, should we? Joining us, football writer Henry Winter. Hi, Henry, good to talk to you. Thanks for joining us. Good decision?
Morning, yes, it is a good decision. I mean, we have to celebrate his arrival. He's a serial winner, as you've been saying today. 2 titles in France, 1 in Germany, and obviously the Champions League with Chelsea in 2021 against Manchester City. He knows the English players. I mean, he can be a slightly divisive individual. He does fall out. There's a slight Taylor Burton element with the media at times. We love him and then we hate him, and then he eventually gets sacked. But he is a winner, and in the short period that he'll be with England, he will galvanise and organise the players and try and get a better balance out of them and make key decisions at key moments in crunch games and actually try and get England over the line.
Will it be a complete change in how England operates?
Well, it could be interesting to see how the fans react. So I don't think they'll be able to sing 10 German bombers in the air anymore. So maybe we'll sort of grow up a little bit off the pitch, Kay. I think the significance, longer term, for English football is that the Football Association really has to look at the coaching pathway and develop more English qualified, English homegrown coaches, so that there's a deeper talent pool when the FA come around to replacing Tuchel. You see him here at PSG. You want English coaches to go and get these great jobs, to go abroad, and then to get that experience. We've got a fantastic £120 million coaching hub at St George's Park in the Staffordshire countryside. And there are coaches going in there, probably going in there today to do their pro licence courses. And they're thinking, is there now a glass ceiling in terms of their pathway, in terms of their dreams to become England manager? So the FA have got to invest more, deepen the pool, so that we can produce English Tuchels.
Does it matter what the nationality is of the head coach?
Well, I think it should be international football should be our best against your best. But at the moment, our best coaches aren't good enough. I mean, Eddie Howe is probably which should be the leading candidate, English at Newcastle United, but he's doing a great job there, and they'd be loath to lose him. And the FA would have to pay compensation, which they won't with Tuchel because he's effectively left Bayern Munich. So I mean, didn't matter with the women's team who've done brilliantly under a Dutch woman, Serena Wiegman. But I do think if we want to take coaching seriously, then we have to develop more coaches of our own. The Germans wouldn't appoint an Englishman.
No, but I think I'm right in saying we've also got a German woman who's coaching, the head coach for the women's team, and look what she managed to achieve.
Yeah, she's Dutch and she's absolutely brilliant.
Forgive me, I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. I mean, she is fantastic. But I just think if we want to take men's coaching seriously in this country and develop our own, find a new Bobby Robson, find a new Alf Ramsey. I mean, it's been, 58 years since 66, all those years of hurt. We should be grown up and we should be producing more. St George's Park has only been there for sort of 12 years. It's not like a Coverciano in Italy, which is sort of far more embedded as a coaching centre and player centre. So, yeah, it's a twin track thing. Absolutely celebrate Tuchel coming in, but also let's develop English Tuchels.
How are you feeling about Lee Carsley? Does he deserve some sympathy?
Some sympathy, but then he made an absolute foul up of the tactics against Greece on Thursday night with playing with a false nine when he had two very real number nines on the bench. Tuchel wouldn't make a mistake like that.
But they are keeping him on for another 2 games?
Yes, they are, which is actually quite sensible because England have got to go to Greece, which won't be easily. You can expect all the Acropolis Now headlines if Carsley sort of makes, or if England don't sort of do well in Greece. So Tuchel can come in on January the 1st and he won't be tainted by any Nations League, these 6 games disappointment that England are currently enduring.
And just a thought about Alec Ferguson. So Alec Ferguson going to be £2 million a year worse off?
Well, I mean, you think what Sir Alex Ferguson has done for that club, the money he has made, the Glazers, even if this isn't a Glazers decision. I think what Manchester United need is Sir Alex Ferguson sitting in the stand and players who are underachieving, managers who are underachieving, look up and realise he is the gold standard, what this great club is about. That hunger, that determination, that willingness, Fergie time, all of that. And if that is worth £2 million a year, well, I think it is, and I think a lot of others do.
So they've made a bad decision and they should reverse it.
Well, I mean, they're cost cutting all over, but the important thing is Sir Alex needs to stay in the director's box and be that inspiration for this team because they're underachieving.
That's us out of Fergie time, so we'll have to go. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Let's take you to the US election, where officials in Georgia say record numbers have cast their ballot after early voting began. It's one of the battleground states where Donald Trump and Kamala Harris have been focusing efforts of the election. Another is Michigan, where our US correspondent Mark Stone has been speaking to voters.
This street tells the biggest story.
There isn't much grand about Detroit's Grand River Avenue. Not along this part, at least. North of gentrified downtown is uptown, forgotten.
What you'll see down Grand River is, it's so bad. It's completely desolate. All black people. And then as soon as you hit downtown, the racial dynamics change. That's our situation, look.
Lorenzo Sewell has been a local pastor here for the last few years.
So when President Trump said Detroit needs help, this is it. Look, right here.
A few days ago, Barack Obama, spooked by the polls clearly, had this.
We have not yet seen the same kinds of energy and turnout in all quarters that seems to be more pronounced with the brothers.
Brothers, help the black woman. I was really offended by it. What did he do for black people? It's almost like they want to seduce us with Obama to say, oh, President Obama, now you got to vote. Now you got to vote for Vice President Harris. Do they think we don't have political prowess? We may be poor and black, but that doesn't mean we're stupid. President Trump is there. I'm here.
It was back in June when Lorenzo was drawn to Donald Trump, the former president praying with him here at the church.
President Obama never came to the hood, so to speak, right? President Joe Biden, he went to the big NAACP dinner, but he never came to the hood. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Pastor.
There are plenty within his orbit who are openly racist. And he encourages that with his language, with his rhetoric, all the time.
Of course there are things that President Trump says that I don't like because I'm a Christian, right? I'd prefer them to say it a different way. Maybe people don't like him, but The world was stable when he was around. Gas was cheaper. I know that my bills were cheaper. Life was better under President Trump. Everybody knows it.
Of course, hardly everybody. Detroit is a Democratic city by a wide margin. But in a key swing state, if Donald Trump can pull just a few, or if they don't vote at all, then Michigan could well be his.
And so she's saying...
Further down Grand River Avenue, an evening gathering organised by a Democratic Party in a state of angst. Black Men for Harris is the tag.
I think most black men in America are determining not do they want to vote for Kamala or Trump, it's do they want to vote for the vice president or stay home.
When you look at Donald Trump, again, you find a lot of platitudes and generalities. And there is more concrete policy with Kamala.
It's imperative that we win Michigan at all costs. And there's really only one choice.
And that is the nub of it. Huge jeopardy in the tightest of races and with almost no time to change minds. Mark Stone, Sky News in Detroit.
Joined by former White House Director of Comms, Anthony Scaramucci. Good to see you.
Good morning.
Working late, up early.
Yeah, American way, the American way.
You were at the Rest of Politics last night, weren't you?
Yeah, that was brilliant. Yeah,
at the O2 live event.
Yeah, and you came.
I did.
Yeah, thank you. Did you enjoy yourself?
Very much so, and I think 15,000 people there. So obviously politics, both in the US and the UK, very much top of the agenda at the moment,
Yeah,
not least your election on the 5th of November. How's it going to go?
But that's an auspicious day for you guys as well, right?
It is, yeah. I try not to mention that.
Right. Yeah,
because you remember what happened, yeah.
Yes, of course.
So, what's going to happen?
I think she will win, but I think it's obviously a very close election. But I'm a numbers person, obviously been on Wall Street my whole career. If you just look at the numbers, she has many advantages to him. And one of the key advantages is that women turn out to vote in higher propensity, higher likelihood on election day. And so she's favored there by 8 or 9 points. She's also got 3 times the money, as I pointed out last night. And she has 5 times, Kay, the volunteers. So remember, this is a get-out-the-vote election for the U.S. People sort of have already decided. It'll be those volunteers and organizers pulling their side into the polling booths and the early voting. And I think she has the edge on him with that.
Interesting, because I spoke to somebody yesterday who'd spent the weekend in America saying that if the vote was today, Trump would win.
Yeah, it's close. Listen, I'm not taking Custer's last stand on this. It's going to be very close, but I do think she has the edge. And I can see their point of view as well.
Polling suggesting that Donald Trump doing well with black and Latino voters. How so? Why?
Yeah, better. You know, there could be a little bit of racism. There could be a little bit of misogyny. You say to yourself, well, why would somebody vote against an African-American woman? You know, I think we know prima facie some of those reasons. I think she's doing a good job of getting her messaging out there now. But remember, Kay, she had to get organized very quickly. July 21st, she's the vice president. Then she's told she's going to eventually be the candidate. So she's had to do a lot of organization over the last couple of months. And so I think if this election were held maybe in December or January, I think she would have a much tighter narrative. I'll be traveling with the campaign in Pennsylvania on October 20th and the 21st. And so I'm going to be in those areas speaking to those people, see if we can move them.
What are the main issues?
I think the main issues are economic. I think there's economic anxiety in the country. Like this country and many countries, we've experienced lots of inflation after COVID. That inflation is coming down now. The great irony for her and Joe Biden is that it's less in the United States than it is around the world, but they get fingered for it. You know, it's a situation that's happened that gets personalized onto the politicians.
Early voting, we're hearing about that in Georgia. Record highs, we're being told. 250,000 people have voted already. How does that bode for the 5th of November?
So that typically bodes well for the Democrats. They have a tendency to vote early. They have a tendency to vote by mail. I don't think she's going to win Georgia, though. When I look at the numbers in Georgia, I think it'll be unlikely that she'll win Georgia. But I think those very same numbers that you're referencing for Georgia are also happening in Pennsylvania. And more Democrats have voted early in Pennsylvania than in the last 2 elections. And that looks really well for her. Unless there's a waterfall of Republicans over the next couple of weeks, she'll likely win Pennsylvania, but I do think she'll lose Georgia.
Trump has previous with Georgia, though, doesn't he? I remember him, that famous telephone conversation that was recorded where he said, can you find me 11,000 votes?
Do you find it astonishing that he's getting away with this sort of stuff? So he's literally on the tape saying, I need to get these votes, go find them. And, of course, these are upstanding officials, and they say, obviously, we can't do that for you. But he's managed to cleverly delay all of these trials until past the election. And, of course, if he wins the election, he'll have extraordinary power to pardon himself. So it's a difficult time for the U.S.
How do you look back on your time working with him?
Listen, it was a rough time in my life. I made a decision to support Trump. Remember, I was a lifelong traditional Republican, sort of in the vein of Liz Cheney and Mitt Romney and those sorts of people. And I missized Trump, and so I have to own that for the rest of my life. But in 2019, I said he really shouldn't be the president again. I worked for President Biden and explained that. I'm surprised he's still with us at age 78, and he seems like he's missing a step on the campaign. But I think he'll get defeated. And once he's defeated, there'll be a reckoning in the party that I was a part of. And we'll have to see if we can rebuild that party and make it less cruel and make it less divisive. He's running on three things: misogyny, racism, and anti-immigration. And those are really un-American things to somebody like me as a person who's achieved some levels of the American dream and been from an immigrant family.
But he might be representing the American dream because he may be the next president. Maybe that's what the American people want.
I feel like it's an American nightmare, Kay. Yeah. Listen, there's a very large group of people that are supporting them. They feel disconnected. They feel left out of the American dream, frankly. He represents them. He's an avatar for their anger. And I think the traditional...
I'm going to write that down. Avatar for their anger. I like it.
He is, but I think the traditional politicians ignored their grievances. Mr. Trump stepped in, or President Trump stepped in to supply advocacy for them. And that's why they're welded to him. That's why they like him.
Might you return to the Republicans with a different leader?
Listen, I'm a moderate person, sort of a center-right person. I believe this women's reproductive freedom issue that's on the ballot is going to help the Democrats. I'm certainly for that. So I'm a mixed bag. I don't really fit in either party, Kay. So I don't know. Maybe you'll have to help me pick a party at some point.
Maybe you have a future in podcasts.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe that. Maybe just stick to podcasting.
It's good to see you as always. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me tell you about NHS workers now being able to anonymously report incidents of sexual misconduct in changes to protect the safety of staff. It follows the Sky News investigation, which uncovered widespread sexual harassment and violence against female paramedics. A warning that Rachel Venable's report contains details of sexual harassment and suicide from the outset.
He just put his hand straight down my top. I was like, in shock. I couldn't move. I didn't know how to react. I just froze, absolutely froze.
All she ever wanted at work was to help save lives. But as a paramedic, Freya says she suffered relentless sexual harassment from colleagues. Then, after being locked in the back of an ambulance and assaulted, she tried to take her own life.
I have scars, mentally and physically. And I had the career I so loved stolen from me. And I'm lonely. I'm on my own because I can't trust anyone.
All year, Sky News has been investigating sexual misconduct in the ambulance service. But NHS bosses say the problem exists right across the health service, and they're determined to tackle it with new policies and training, and with staff now able to anonymously report their colleagues for inappropriate behaviour.
I really hope that all of the measures that we have announced today gives people confidence that we are taking these awful behaviours and assaults seriously, and that we want people to come forward. They will be supported, they will be believed, and they will be heard.
For campaigners, it's a move in the right direction.
I think that there is definitely a culture of tolerance of these behaviours and attitudes within the NHS. I know from my own personal experience of trying to raise complaints that it can be really difficult.
The true scale of sexual harassment and abuse in the NHS is only just beginning to be understood. But as more people feel able, by any means, to speak up, it's hoped real and cultural change can begin. Rachel Venables, Sky News.
And if you're affected by the issues raised in our report, help is available from the Samaritans 24 hours a day by calling 116 123 or emailing joe@samaritans.org. Still to come on The Breakfast Show for you here on Sky News Wednesday morning. Breaking world records as rare jewellery belonging to Dame Shirley Bassey fetches over $1 million in Paris.
I'm David Blevins, and I'm Sky's senior Ireland correspondent. It takes 60 minutes to cross the Irish Sea. It took the British monarchy a century. I've spent 30 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace.
The political parties of Northern Ireland have reached agreement.
If there's anyone who might know how to fix Northern Ireland's devolved government, it's the American architect.
Changes in circumstance require changes in approach.
The end of the political stalemate, the start of a new chapter for Northern Ireland.
I confirmed that I am willing to take up the office of First Minister. My election to the post of First Minister demonstrates the change that's happening on this island.
Catholics and Protestants on different sides, now facing the same threat.
If we both contract COVID-19 and end up in hospital, religion's nothing.
People here are adept at finding hope amid adversity. That's the spirit of a place that punches way above its weight. We help you understand the world with us. A toxic blue-green algae now poisoning Loch Ness. It's breaking your heart what has happened here.
It is.
This is a vital resource, a national treasure, now fighting for its very life. They are effectively surrounded by Northern Ireland, and that makes this the most unlikely of international frontiers.
If there's a hard border, I think it'll cripple the country.
Winter is coming. Welcome to Winterfell. It's an iconic location in this globally acclaimed drama. Ophelia was the most powerful hurricane this far east in the Atlantic on record. Sky News, the full story first.
Play Sky News.
From the Sky News Centre at 7.
Now that you're up to date, we can go into a bit more detail.
Things can change incredibly quickly.
Taken by surprise.
Have you ever known a moment like this in British politics before? Yes. Cheers. We'll start with breaking news.
Let's get the latest on the ground.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better.
I say, bring it on.
With America divided and tensions running high, get ready for an election like no other.
Join our teams as we follow the campaign trail as America decides.
We will win, win, win.
Get closer to the action this US election with full reaction and analysis.
Sky News, the full story first.
Ready this time?
Very
Excellent.
much.
All the family are here. Wilf standing by. I'm guessing you keep an eye on inflation for us, Wilf. Good morning.
Good morning, Kate. With somewhat of a bonanza, I think, today for me. We've got an inflation story, we've got a football story, so I'm pretty excited about both. I should start with the inflation story, obviously. 1.7%, the forecast 1.9%, so unreservedly good news for both the Bank of England and also the government. So the odds now of a rate cut next month in November have gone up from 80% to 90%. Also, 75% chance of a further rate cut in December. So pretty significant, that inflation data, and does set the tone rather nicely for PMQs as well, both because, of course, both sides have been sort of in the blame game. Well, this was your fault, this was the other side's fault. This is unreservedly good news, and probably both will try and claim it was down to them. It also just gives a little bit more headroom around the margins for Rachel Reeves ahead of the budget if she was going to do some things that might have been inflationary with inflation below target, she'll feel she has the cover to do that. And then the England manager, of course, announcement, Thomas Tuchel, the press conference due at 1:30. We'll be building up to that. And whatever you think about the appointment just gets you to focus your mind again on the future. Can we win a trophy in a couple of years' time? 18 months his contract, so it's going to include that next tournament.
Fantastic. For now, thanks very much indeed. You'd think diamonds are forever. That's what Shirley Bassey used to tell us. However, they last
Diamonds are forever, forever, forever. Diamonds are...
They're not though, are they, Daniel?
Not if you're selling them at auction. She's got a very expensive and extensive collection. Some of it went on under the hammer in Paris, collecting 1.8 million for the lot of everything that she sold. That's a record-breaking auction for her. And let's take a look at some of the pieces that did go under the hammer there. This Cartier gold watch, I think we can take a look at that. There it is, £54,000, 976. That's what that went under the hammer for. Would you fancy that one, Kay?
No.
The next one
Not a big fan of Cartier.
Not a big fan of Cartier.
No.
Well, how about these diamonds from Elton John?
Oh, yeah, now we're talking.
Elton John.
You can have the Cartier and I'll have the diamonds.
I'll take the Cartier.
Yeah.
I'll take it.
Well, we'll see. Let's see. What else have
if
you
you've got £39,000 to throw at that, then that could have been yours. And then there's this emerald and diamond necklace that she wore at her first Royal Variety in front of the Queen. That went for £144,985. So,
fantastic.
Yeah,
and that was in Paris, wasn't it?
It was in Paris. So some incredible pieces there.
Yeah.
Incredible. Love them, but I'm not sure they're quite in my budget, Kay, but we'll see how it goes.
Daniel's going to buy them for us.
Very generous.
We've only just met this morning, actually. That's quite forward.
One question about Shirley Bassey, though. Obviously, she's known for being the only artist to sing 3 Bond tunes.
Yes.
Diamonds Are Forever, we heard that one.
Yes.
Name the other 2.
Well, what's really useful is that we only have 10 seconds left on the show, so we don't have to worry about that. And it will give me time to Google during the break. You're whispering?
Moonraker, Goldfinger.
Moonraker and Goldfinger. We'll see you in a second.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
morning, everybody. It's 8 o'clock. Coming up on today's programme for you, why we could now be in store for back-to-back interest rate cuts.
Plus, tax rises or spending cuts, how the Chancellor plans to fill a £40 billion black hole.
And why some diamonds aren't forever for Dame Shirley Bassey.
It's Wednesday, the 16th of October. A surprisingly bigger than expected fall in inflation to 1.7%. But what's behind that fall? The US gives Israel a 30-day deadline to boost aid into Gaza, or it will cut military assistance. A series of Israeli airstrikes on Beirut this morning. Live pictures coming to us here at Sky Centre. The first in 5 days. We'll have the latest live. A warning about the desperate state of end-of-life care on a landmark day for assisted dying laws in Parliament. When Starmer met Swift, new details emerge as Downing Street denies the tickets were a thank you for security. And a German coach for the English men's team, Thomas Tuchel, to be unveiled later at Wembley. Inflation's down and by more than expected. Ali's here. Tell me more.
It is below the Bank of England target for the first time in 3 years. So this is good news for the Prime Minister. It's gone down from 2.2% to 1.7%, partly down to fuel prices, airfares. Obviously, the good news for people is that there's going to be a knock-on effect, we think, for prices. I should say core inflation, underlying inflation, still at 3.2%. As I say, you know, good news for the government, but there are a few other stories that are not necessarily so good.
Yeah, that's right. And we should just say that as a result of that, we do expect interest rates to drop in November and December as well.
Exactly, yes. So people could be helped with their mortgages. So that is going to be another big knock-on effect.
Also good news for the Prime Minister. Less good news for the Prime Minister is a lot of the front pages again today.
Yeah, so less good news for Prime Minister, how he's going to raise some money for the budget, but also Taylor Swift is back on the front pages of, I think, 4 newspapers, and the fact that we've got left-leaning papers like The Guardian and papers like The Times leading on this is interesting. The new bit of information is that the Prime Minister met with Taylor Swift, what's called a brush-by meeting, 10 minutes or so. It's not the sort of fact of this in itself, although it's not insignificant, but it's the sort of drip that we've had, Kate, day after day of new facts coming out. And I think the sense I've got from some Labour backbenchers I've been talking to is the way that this has been handled, the kind of communications around this, has not been brilliant. And of course, you know, the background to this is that the Prime Minister helped with a enhanced police escort, which...
well, certainly Downing Street did. They denied that he got involved.
Downing Street, you're absolutely right. Helped with this escort. I should say, you know, it was after she pulled a gig in Austria because of a terror threat. But they did help with that. And then, of course, he went to see her again at the end of August. And as we know now, he met with Taylor Swift.
So his office, in some way, intervened to try to make sure that she got a blue light escort. And after that was agreed, he accepted 4 tickets to go to a Taylor Swift concert. So does that pass the sniff test, I suppose, is what people are asking.
Look, I think there's a kind of rule, don't accept hospitality from people that you're making decisions about, and that is where the Prime Minister seems to have gone wrong. He, of course, will say that Downing Street will say that he paid for those tickets, that it was all properly declared eventually. But as you say, it is on the front pages. It has pushed through into the public consciousness, and unlike the inflation figures, it's not good for the Prime Minister.
We'll see what happens. Hopefully, that's the end of this story, but who knows? It just keeps rumbling on, doesn't it?
It does.
OK, Ali, for now, thanks very much indeed. Let me tell you about a series of Israeli airstrikes that have happened this morning in Beirut. The first such strikes in 5 days. It comes as the United States gives Israel 30 days to improve the humanitarian situation in Gaza or risk losing US military assistance. Let's get more with Alex Rossi standing by in Beirut for us. Hello to you, Alex. We haven't seen strikes in 5 days, and then once again this morning they reintroduced these airstrikes.
Yeah, the last strike here was on Thursday early evening. We were actually live on air shortly afterwards, and we heard those strikes this morning. The strikes came in, rocking the capital here, hitting the area known as Dahir. This is the Hezbollah stronghold in the southern part of the city. It's just over the skyline, over the buildings over here. Israel issued evacuation orders, but they were only put in place about an hour before these strikes came in. Many people, of course, if they were in that area, would have been asleep. We don't think there are any casualties. That area is pretty much empty of people. Lots of displaced people have moved from Dahir into other parts of the city. Just go down the Corniche here and you'll find lots of people living under canvas, under cardboard, who've had to flee from their homes. Such is the danger in that area. Now, the Israeli military say they were targeting a weapons storage area. Hezbollah has said in the past that there are no weapons. It keeps no weapons inside the capital here in Beirut. But as you were saying, the first strikes in 5 days should add. The last strike on Thursday killed 22 people and levelled a few apartment blocks. Now, we've also had this letter from the United States to the Israelis warning them that they really must let more aid get into northern Gaza, particularly. They've got 30 days to do that, and one of the things that the Americans may do if they don't do that is withdraw the supply of weapons, although lots of people are quite sceptical that will happen, especially with the Iran-Israel crisis building. But I'll give you a sample of the letter now. This was leaked to the press. It reads, "We are particularly concerned that recent actions by the Israeli government, including halting commercial imports, denying or impeding nearly 90% of humanitarian movements between northern and southern Gaza in September, continuing burdensome and excessive dual-use restrictions, and instituting new vetting and onerous liability and customs requirements for humanitarian staff and shipments, together with increased lawlessness and looting, are contributing to an accelerated deterioration in the conditions in Gaza." Now, Kay, we know from aid agencies working in Gaza that things are getting pretty desperate indeed. The spectre of famine is once again haunting the enclave, but we should say that America has issued these kinds of warnings to the Israelis before, but of course we see the conditions in Gaza remain very much the same.
OK, for now, thank you. And a reminder that the new episode of The World is a podcast, of course, with Richard and also with Yalda, released at lunchtime today. You can scan the QR code on the screen to start downloading it. Rest of today's top stories.
Yes, we'll start with the NHS, shall we? Because NHS workers will now be able to anonymously report incidents of sexual misconduct in changes to protect the safety of staff. It follows a Sky News investigation which uncovered widespread sexual harassment and violence against female paramedics. NHS bosses say the problem exists across the entire health service, but they're determined to tackle it.
Well, I really hope that all of the measures that we have announced today gives people confidence that we are taking these awful behaviours and assaults seriously, and that we want people to come forward. They will be supported, they will be believed, and they will be heard.
Nut ban announcements on aeroplanes are unlikely to be effective and may even give people a false sense of security. That's according to new research from experts. The aviation medical consultancies say flyers also shouldn't worry about allergens in the air conditioning systems of aircraft. Instead, people flying with nut allergies should ask to board first so they can thoroughly clean their seat and surrounding area. Former Chief of the General Staff, General Sir Mike Jackson, has died at the age of 80. During his time, he led the British Army during the Allied invasion of Iraq in 2003. That's after serving in both Northern Ireland and Bosnia. The father of three was also dubbed the Prince of Darkness, owing to his gravelly voice and uncompromising style. The United States has welcomed two new giant pandas which have arrived from China in what's known as panda diplomacy, as part of a 10-year conservation agreement. The pandas, named Bao Li and King Bao, left a research facility in southwestern China and have arrived at the Smithsonian's National Zoo. The pair will remain in quarantine for at least a month, and then the public will have an opportunity to see them from January. And also, twin baby pandas, also sent from China, have made their long-awaited debut at Berlin Zoo. The sister cubs were seen for the first time by the press yesterday and will be welcoming the public from today.
Very content, don't they? Ashisha's here to talk to us about assisted dying and also about palliative care.
Assisted dying takes a huge step towards a debate which could see assisted dying becoming legalised in this country. Today, the bill will be introduced into Parliament later this afternoon. But before then, there is a lot of worried discussion taking place about the state of palliative care in this country. The hospice sector is under severe strain. Funding is at crisis levels, and we've seen at least one hospice close its doors to sick and dying patients in the last few weeks. Palliative care doctors, many of them are opposed to assisted dying because they say palliative care in this country needs urgent intervention because people are dying long, painful, lingering deaths. So before any conversations can start taking place about assisted dying, we need to have a very good look at ways to improve end-of-life care in this country for patients who need it. I spent a day with staff and patients at a hospice in southeast London, and these are some of their stories.
Hey, Tim.
Tim was given just a few months to live. That was 3.5 years ago.
Let's say what, Tim.
Born with learning disabilities, he later developed cancer, and it kept returning.
You be there? Hello, Tim. It's lovely to see you.
But despite being very sick, Tim can live at home with mum Valerie because of support from his palliative care nurse, Phoebe.
This is Joe. It's really sad to see him deteriorate, particularly because when I first started seeing him, you know, he was independently mobile in his wheelchair, he would take lots of videos, he'd be super, super chatty. I'm not going to lie, I do cry quite a lot at work. Yeah, I think you're human. Which flavour would you like?
Valerie is 82, and naturally, she's worried about the future.
I think if you speak to any parent of a child with learning disabilities, well, all those that I have known have said, I would like my child to die before me, because we've seen so many go into care, lovely people there looking after them, but then you go back a few months later, those lovely people have gone and there's somebody else there.
Would you be able to cope without the palliative care you receive?
I couldn't do this without them.
Breathing.
The quality of the country's end-of-life care system is being questioned as MPs consider legalising assisted dying. St Christopher's Hospice, where Phoebe works, neither supports or opposes a change in the law. But the hospice sector is a strong and important voice in that debate.
We've got hospices who are cutting back their services already, making frontline staff redundant because they're no longer able to fund those services. And so whether or not assisted dying is introduced by this government, we must fix the end-of-life care system in the UK.
Her catheter bag would be full of blood and they wouldn't come out.
Linda has experienced the best and worst of end-of-life care. Her mother died peacefully and comfortably at a Marie Curie hospice, but her Aunt Mary chose to die at home.
We had to buy her incontinence pads, we had to buy different creams because the deliveries weren't regular. We had to chase everyone for everything. And it's just so tiring all the time having to fight.
In the UK, we don't talk about death enough. But now, that conversation is being forced on us, and it could be one of the most important ones we ever have in our lives. Ashish Joshi, Sky News.
And you can see more of Ashish's special report on end-of-life care on the UK tonight at 8, or scan the QR code right now. Shadow Financial Secretary to the Treasury, Nigel Huddleston, is with us now. I want to talk about inflation in a second, but first of all, the assisted dying bill. Where are you on that?
I've agonised over this over the last few years, as have most MPs, actually, because we get constituency correspondence on this, making really compelling arguments on both sides. I'm also quite good friends with Dame Esther Ransom. We stood against each other in 2010 general election in Luton South, and we've been friends ever since. And she's been contacting...
on the programme, actually.
Oh, right. Well, she's fantastic. Say hello to her from me. But also, I've had constituents come in to me whose family members have gone to Dignitas, and they've come in to me and say they felt guilty for the rest of their life of assisting their parents to die. So it's a really emotionally charged debate. It's a free vote, which is good. I'm going to be listening very carefully to the opinions, but one thing I do need to do is read the wording of the legislation really carefully to make sure that if we do make it slightly easier, that it's still got very strong caveats. I'd be quite concerned about making sure that it's not the thin end of the wedge here.
Do you feel that you have changed your view somewhat since the last opportunity?
I have changed my mind backwards and forwards about 4 or 5 times. I really have. And I'm not the only one to be in that position. So I do invite, as do I think most MPs, our constituents, to get in contact with us and express their views.
But you accept the frustration of people like Dame Esther?
I do, yes. I understand it, and I understand the appeal, but I would need to make sure that there was some very severe restrictions if we did ease it.
But then we have people like the Archbishop of Westminster, who apparently says suffering is an intrinsic part of our human journey. That's very difficult for people who are incredibly ill to swallow.
It is, and also there is a religious element to this, which is exactly why it's a free vote, because these kind of conscience issues and issues that are also have a religious element are free votes. Okay. And I say, whatever way any MP votes, there will be a large number of the constituents disappointed and unhappy. But that's our job. We need to make the decisions based on the balance of the evidence. And I can assure everybody watching that every MP will take this debate very seriously and genuinely agonise over these decisions.
You must be pleased with the inflation rate figures?
Yes, I mean, we welcome the reduction in inflation. Of course, you know, there's a time lag to these kind of economic statistics, and this reduction is largely a result of the difficult decisions that we made when we were in power, we were in government. So the reduction is good news. It was the #1 point of the previous government's economic strategy. I'm worried about where we may go from here.
You're not claiming success from your previous government?
Inflation figures, you know, this didn't happen magically since July, since there was a Labour government. This is a result of long-term economic planning for a long period of time.
Let me stop you there, because when inflation comes down, your government always used to say it was as a result of what you were doing. When inflation went up, you said it was nothing to do with you.
No, that's not true. I mean, when inflation went up, it was largely a result of economic factors around the world. The invasion of Ukraine, significant increases in prices, the pandemic.
So nothing to do with you.
We made... And government decisions in terms of spending is also an important factor here. But I think inflation went up around the world, and now it's come down around the world, but also is in combination with pretty tight fiscal circumstances that we adopted when we were in government. That is not necessarily the case that we're seeing now, and we're coming up to a budget, and it sounds like they're going to continue to splurge money and increase taxes. That is dangerous for the direction of travel of inflation. Above inflation pay rises in the public sector, that is all compromising the potential direction of travel for inflation. So, yes, there are global factors at play, but domestic factors and domestic decision-making, particularly made by the Chancellor, are really important here as well.
That's what you say. This is what Darren Jones says.
Well, look, it's good news for family finances that inflation has fallen below 2%. But of course, there's more work to be done to protect working people and bring stability and growth back to the economy, which is what the Chancellor and this government is doing now and in the run-up to the budget at the end of October.
Thoughts?
Well, I agree with him. It's good news for family finances. But again, I don't think he was trying to claim that that's magically happened since they came to power in July. What they have done is given inflation-busting pay increases to the public sector and also splurge money and therefore compromising the debt situation, which could compromise the inflation statistics going forward. So I'm glad he welcomes it at the moment. It also makes a mockery, by the way, of the argument they said of inheriting the worst economic circumstances. Transparently, that is not the case. You know, I'm glad he welcomed it. It would have been nice if he acknowledged the previous work of our government.
£22 billion black hole is what you left him with, he would say.
Well, these are all political decisions. Now, let's even take it on face value and say they inherited a £22 billion black hole. Then why spend £10 billion on inflation-busting pay increases? Why spend £8 billion on GB Energy? Why spend £7 billion on a national wealth fund? It doesn't stack up. If you believe that you have financial circumstances that are not possible, why spend even more money? This is not credible. It's not a credible argument. They are making political decisions to spend more of the taxpayers' money. It's beyond what the taxpayer is currently paying, and therefore we are seeing how do you resolve that? By whacking up taxes, which is now what we fear will happen in the budget.
We don't know. We'll have to wait, is what they say when they're sat in that chair. Are you happy with the leadership contest as it's played out so far?
Well, I'm backing Kemi Badenoch. Robert Jenner is a good friend of mine as well. In fact, all 6 candidates were friends of mine. I am happy because we're having a civil debate. There's a lot of issues being raised. We're recognising and reflecting on why it is that we lost the last election, and I think we need to use the time in opposition very carefully and seriously to reflect on that. And I am pleased about the debate. We had 6 outstanding candidates. We're now down to 2, but I'm backing Kemi because I worked with her really, really closely, and I know she's got the skills to do the job.
Why won't she debate on live television?
Well, she is debating. I think she's, I'm afraid, on one of your opposition channels
But
soon.
it's not just the 2 of them.
Well, look, there's a lot. The key thing about this debate is getting out and about across the country and reaching out to membership. And actually, both candidates have been doing that for weeks, and that's really important. This is slightly different from when we were in choosing a new leader who was going to be Prime Minister. This is about the leader of our party who can then come up with a strategy and policies to win the next election, and therefore the primary focus is on the membership. And believe me, both candidates are spending a lot of time talking to members. They're doing membership events, they're engaging one-on-one sometimes with individual members because they're the voters in this one. And as I say, I'm confident Kemi has got the right skills and experience to do this job really, really well. And she's out there talking to people all the time.
Are the papers making too much of this Keir Starmer Taylorgate?
I don't think so, because it's not a good look, but it also raises questions about his judgment. You know, he should be aware that this doesn't look well, in particular given that he's taking freebies when he's also making decisions to take money away from pensioners.
He's now paid for those tickets.
Sorry?
He's paid for those tickets.
Well, he has now, retrospectively, but he didn't at the time. So because media and others have put pressure on him, he's done that. And the scale with Keir Starmer is, incomparable to anything before. And, and clothing and so on. I mean, people can kind of understand sometimes
Boris Johnson took
tickets.
his fair share of freebies, didn't he?
But again, it was transparent in that case, and also wasn't in exchange for anything. The questions being raised now are what was given in return. And I say, in particular as well, when he's taking money away from pensioners whilst looking like he's having a rather extravagant lifestyle, that is what really strikes
So what
with
questions
the
do
public.
you think he still needs to answer, or is it all out there now, as
Well,
far as Taylor Swift is
I think the question is what exactly did happen, what was given in exchange, whether it's Taylor Swift or whether it's Downing Street parties, what was given in exchange for these things. Accepting gifts, understand it as long as it's under the rules of transparency. The question is always what was given in exchange, and I don't think we've had full answers to that yet.
OK, it's good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. And I'll pass on your warm wishes to our lovely lady when she joins us in just a short time, dear Mr. Ranson, of course. Thank you.
Thank you
very much. We're going to be talking about inflation figures in just a moment or two, because our very own Paul actually did that interview that you saw just a few minutes ago, and he'll be joining us here to talk about that. Also, we're going to be talking to Ali about what we just heard from the Conservatives, and the fact that the suggestion is there are still lots of questions to answer as a result of the latest newspapers and their suggestions, allegations, that there's more in the Taylorgate story than we know so far. And while I was doing that, this happened. So tell me about Darren Jones.
Darren Jones is Chief Secretary to the Treasury, and I've just been to see him on behalf of broadcasters to put to him the positive and slightly unexpected news about inflation this morning, that inflation in the year to September fell to 1.7%, down half percentage point from 2.2% the previous month. Can we hear from him?
We have already.
We have already?
Yeah, he was
Forgive
very
me.
happy, wasn't he?
He was. So it's good news. You know already that he thinks it's good news for consumers, but there is more work to do for the government. We're in the middle of a bit of a shift of messaging here. For the first few months of this government, anything that approaching good news economically was they didn't really want to talk about. They want to talk about their black hole in the finances. It felt like if it was growth, economic growth or declining inflation that was the responsibility of the previous government, they didn't want to talk about it. Now he's welcoming this good news. We saw the Chancellor welcoming growth figures last week. I did ask him about national insurance contributions, employer national insurance contributions. I didn't. We had 2 goes because someone's phone alarm went off halfway through the first answer, and I still didn't get anything. Yeah. The argument, as you know, Labour said during the election they would not increase taxes on working people, VAT, NI, and income tax. The argument, pretty clearly from economists, is that if you increase employers' national insurance payments, whether on the pay or on their pensions contributions, that ends up as a tax on working people because wages will not rise as quickly as a result. He wasn't having that. He didn't get into a semantic debate. I also asked him, perhaps more interestingly, as we look towards the budget, about the conversations he's having right now as Chief Secretary of the Treasury with departments, individual departments, about what are the spending expectations. They're setting the spending review right now. The figures left by the last government would have amounted to real terms cuts for most government departments, apart from the ones that are protected. He wouldn't commit, wouldn't rule out that some departments might see a real terms fall in their budgets. But clearly the government's trying to do 2 things here. It's trying to, it came to government a promise to increase growth, but also to repair the public sector. And how you do that without more money is the question for the budget.
And the Conservatives, just in the last 3 seconds, telling this programme that the government should accept that it doesn't just happen overnight, and it was their hard work that has contributed to these figures.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, you'll remember Rishi Sunak pledging to halve inflation. At that time, it was very much seen as a Tory success story if inflation came down. But, yeah, you rightly were putting that to him, Kay. The point I think he made that was interesting and right is that these are political decisions that we're seeing the Labour Party making, being that the £10-odd billion that's being spent on across the board public sector pay rises, or the potential, as has been heavily hinted, that we could see national insurance rising for employers. These are political decisions that they are going to have to live with the consequences of. And, of course, you know, we've had Rachel Reeves talking again and again about £22 billion black hole, now seems to have grown to a £40 billion black hole. But how they fix that is... they're making decisions about that, and they're going to have to face it.
We'll leave it there for now, guys. Thanks very much indeed. Thank you. Still to come on The Breakfast Show for you here on Sky News. A new assisted dying law is introduced to Parliament today. We'll hear from one of the bill's key supporters, Dame Esther Ransom. Plus, Donald Trump and Kamala Harris make their pitch to voters in the key swing state of Michigan. We take a look at the mood in Detroit.
They lost diamonds are forever, forever, forever. Diamonds are
Breaking world records as rare jewellery belonging to Dame Shirley Bassey fetches more than £1 million in Paris.
I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent.
An enormous explosion that's just come down. I think it was a monster just landed in between us.
Hundreds and hundreds of people hoping to get north, ultimately to get to the United States.
It's a border where they're not welcome, yet they keep coming.
We saw snatch squads going in, grabbing people, taking them out and putting them into trucks and taking them away.
They make about 50 kilos of fentanyl a week. It's incredibly dangerous and toxic stuff.
There's been an upsurge in deaths. The fighting between the gangs is getting more and more vicious.
Is this now all your territory?
Yeah.
The battlefield is outside the barricades, which is over there. This is much more like a normal town.
It's really sending a clear message that Venezuela is eager for change.
We're being crushed. Free from wherever you get your news. We are in the middle of a forest, in a jungle really, and they're attempting to keep these men alive. This is real, hardcore emergency medicine. The information on this could bring down the entire network, not just in Iraq and Syria, but across the world. Sky News, the full story first.
Well, hundreds of thousands of people have been using the beast for years to traverse Mexico, but it is really dangerous. Many people have died riding it.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Significant day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Why only in America? People want their country to work.
Just want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
Hi again, everybody. Welcome back to The Breakfast Show. In just a moment, we'll hear from Dame Esther Ranson ahead of a new bill on assisted dying being introduced to Parliament. And is it right to fine parents who keep their children off school for a holiday? Good question.
Good question to ask me. I'm not a parent.
No, I am, and I never did.
Never did?
No, go to school.
It's fair.
And even if he was poorly, go to school, and if you're still poorly by lunchtime, you can come home. It was a tough
start, but it paid off. It paid off.
Yeah, there you go.
Let's bring some of our top stories as well, shall we, this morning. UK inflation has dropped to 1.7% in September. That's down 0.5% from August, the first time the rate has fallen below the 2% target set by the Bank of England in over 3 years. The fall much bigger than expected. A series of Israeli airstrikes have hit Beirut this morning. This is the image live for you. It's the first such strikes in 5 days. It comes as the United States has given Israel 30 days to improve the humanitarian situation in Gaza or risk losing US military assistance. A bill on assisted dying, as we've been saying, will be presented in Parliament later today. Charities warn that the end-of-life care should be fixed before legislation is considered. Thomas Tuchel will hold a news conference at Wembley at 1:30 this afternoon after agreeing an 18-month deal to become the new England men's football manager.
Returning to the Middle East, and after a recent attack on the Al-Aqsa hospital in Gaza, 4 people were burnt to death. One of those people was 19-year-old Shaban al-Dula, who was sheltering in a tent nearby. Our Middle East correspondent Alistair Bunkle reports on his life and death.
In a different place, in a different time, Shaban would have had a bright future ahead of him. But Shaban was born in Gaza, where people now measure their futures in hours and days.
Hello, I'm Shaban from Palestine. I'm a student studying computer system engineer.
When the war started, he left home in Gaza and built this tent for his family in the grounds of Al-Aqsa Hospital.
I'm taking care of my family as I'm the oldest. I have 2 sisters and 2 little brothers and my parents. We live in a very hard circumstances, suffering from various things such as homelessness and limited food and extremely limited medicine. We are in the blood bank.
Later that day, he donated blood to help the wounded in Gaza. Shaban continued to study in his tent, but walked for half an hour each day just to get internet access. He set up a GoFundMe page to raise money to take his family to Egypt, to safety. Then, 10 days ago, he was injured in an Israeli strike while sleeping in a mosque. Shaban was still recovering when another Israeli airstrike hit the hospital grounds on Sunday night and his tent caught alight. His mother, Ala, was also trapped and died next to her son in the inferno.
Shaban was on fire. My father was busy with my younger brother, so I couldn't help but run towards Shaban to try to help him. People stopped me from getting close to the danger, saying the civil defense was on its way to put the fire out. I kept saying, "But my brother's on fire, my brother's on fire. Please let me go." They wouldn't let me. My brother was burning in front of my eyes, and I couldn't do anything to help him. It's an indescribable feeling. No one in the world can understand it. Can you imagine seeing your loved ones die in front of you? Your brother, your role model in life, your mother, your rock and caretaker.
The Israeli military said it hit a Hamas command center. As yet, they've shown no evidence of that. They've also said that the fire was started by secondary explosions in the hospital car park. It is one theory.
It was a painful scene. It's hard. I saw my cousin and my uncle's wife both on fire. They were moving around trying to stop it. I really don't understand what we did to deserve this. We're displaced families. What did we do wrong?
Shaban's final months were spent hiding from the fighting in a place where there is now nowhere to hide. In life, he had dreamt of memorizing the Quran and becoming a computer scientist. In death, he has become another figure in an unfathomable number, 42,000, the Gaza dead. Shaban was 19. He would have turned 20 today. Alistair Bunkle, Sky News, in Jerusalem.
Let's talk about assisted dying. Should be proposals to give people with terminal illness the right to choose to end their lives are being introduced in Parliament today. Private Members' Bill. Let's speak to Dame Esther Ranson, broadcaster and founder of Silverline and Childline, of course. Hello to you, Dame Esther. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Nigel Huddleston, we were chatting to him a little bit earlier on this hour. I believe that you both ran for the seat in Luton. He was talking about assisted dying and which way he might vote in Parliament. He says he changes his mind depending on the day and the information that he's given. What would you say to him to convince him that he should vote in favour of this?
I would say, good morning, Nigel. I remember our time together in Luton South with great pleasure. I would suggest that you read the Select Committee report, which has collected evidence from around the world where countries have reformed their own criminal law. And listen to your own constituents, too, because so many people these days have witnessed the painful death of someone close to them, someone who was asking for help to die. And for me, one of the most persuasive conversations I've had was with Dr. Hilary Jones, excuse me, so sorry, of the Lorraine television program, who described how he had to watch helplessly as his mother died in acute pain which no palliative care could ease. And she refused to let him help her die because she knew how dangerous it would be for him professionally. And he felt terribly guilty about not being able to give her the good, pain-free, easy death that we would give someone we love if that's what they ask us to do. So what I'm saying to Nigel and to many others is all I'm asking for is the choice, my personal choice. I know Elora well, Baroness Finlay, she's a terrific palliative care consultant. I disagree with her. I don't want her to make that choice. I want to have the dignity of choice so that I can shorten, not my life, shorten my death.
I know that you've been aware of the Archbishop of Westminster suggesting that life is an intrinsic part of death and an intrinsic part of the human journey. How do you feel when a man of the cloth says that sort of thing?
I think everybody has a right to their own religious belief. That's what it means to live in our democracy. We believe in religious freedom. But I don't believe that being an archbishop gives you the right to dictate terms to someone who doesn't share your religious beliefs. And I think the Archbishop of Westminster went too far when he wrote a letter which had to be read aloud in every Catholic pulpit, instructing Catholics to write to their own MP opposing a change in the law. I think that's political lobbying. Of course, he has a right to his own faith. And of course, he can describe his faith. But let me, who happen not to be Catholic, make up my own mind and have my own personal choice about whether or not I feel this is an individual freedom we should all have the choice to make.
We know that Kim is such a difficult subject for so many people to talk about, isn't it? But do you feel that potentially this time around, we know that MPs voted against when they last voted almost a decade ago now. Do you think you may get a different result this time?
I just don't know. I know that there are very strong feelings both ways. I know that there are groups like Elora who work in palliative care who worry that it might damage their own very important medical skill, whereas the evidence in the Select Committee report is that it doesn't damage it. And in fact, in some countries, palliative care is actually enhanced and improved by the introduction of assisted dying in very careful circumstances, as this bill would do. I know that disabled people sometimes feel that they will be pressurized into taking their own lives, which is a tragic reflection on the way disabled people sometimes feel they are valued. Of course, we don't want this to apply to disabled people unless they become terminally ill and ask for assisted death. And, you know, the religious groups, as we've said, sometimes have strong views, not just Catholics and COE, but I believe some Muslim people feel that suffering has to be endured as part of life. So I think there are strong feelings on both sides, and we will see what happens in November when the actual debate takes place.
Okay, Dame Esther, thank you. May I just ask how you're feeling?
Well, I'm talking an awful lot about death and dying, which isn't my natural attitude. I prefer to think about life and living, but I understand that this is such a crucial issue, literally a life and death issue, that it's part of who I am, that when people ask me to speak about my own views, that's what I do. Maybe I should do it less, but that is what I've done for many years, and I'm afraid that's dominating my life at the moment.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Dame Esther. Keep as well as you can. Thank you.
Will do.
Well, Baroness Finlay is with us. You heard what Dame Esther had to say. She said in some cases assisted dying can enhance and improve palliative care, which is the area that you work in. Good morning.
Thank you. Good morning. And it's good to hear how well she is, particularly when some time ago she thought that death was really close. And in a way that shows how we just can't predict life expectancy and prognosis. Palliative care around the world has improved because we've been educating people everywhere. But there's really clear evidence that in countries that have changed the law, those improvements are slower, and in some places they've stood still, much slower than in places that haven't changed the law and have really been working to make sure that everybody has an improved quality of life. And I think it's important to remember that the law of the land applies to everybody, not just people who are of strong mind, but it has to apply to the most vulnerable. Our laws are there to protect people across the whole population, to ensure that we have as near social justice as we can get. That's what we're striving for in this country, that there is justice across the piece for everybody. And so in any law, we have to look and see how could it potentially be misinterpreted? What are the unintended consequences? Who will be affected? And are safeguards really there? And in everything I've seen written, they're not safeguards. They're only eligibility criteria, and there are not good safeguards.
Our own health correspondent, Ashish Joshi, telling us that there is a crisis in palliative care, and as far as he's aware, he's seeing hospices close.
Yes, absolutely. Hospices only get about 37% of their funding from the NHS. All the rest depends on charitable giving. So really, we have to say, surely care of people who are very seriously ill and who may hear a devastating diagnosis needs to be there. We need to change and get that right. We need to have a system whereby everybody's supported, and we need to have a system whereby people, whenever they feel that they're in crisis, actually can get help rather than feel that they're languishing or that they have to go to an emergency department or wherever. And we need support for people to be at home, because we know that good palliative care costs less to the NHS, actually, than poor care. Good care is less expensive than bad care.
Support to keep people at home, going back to assisted dying. What about those that want to keep their loved ones at home as they make the journey into wherever they go next, rather than having to go to Switzerland or wherever?
Death, there is a view that somehow this would provide a Hollywood death, that you would take one little tablet and everything would be over. That's not the reality. You're talking with assisted suicide about taking 100 or so tablets, possibly crushed in a sludge or dissolved in liquid, or if not that, then injected with lethal drugs, which actually, in a lot of patients, just completely paralyse you. You can't move a muscle and you die of asphyxia. This is not the Hollywood death that's described. When people are dying and it is well managed with the support they need, what you find is that systems gradually and gently close down. They just slowly, gently slip away. And sometimes you'll be with someone who's dying and you'll turn around and say, oh, yeah, they've now gone. It's very gentle as things close down one after another. That's how we should be managing death for everybody. But yes, we need the teams of people. We need the trained staff to be there, to be available, to provide that support. And we need, as well, to have clinicians who know how to use medication, really to control difficult symptoms, and are networked to seek help and ask others to be involved in other disciplines if there are problems that are not coming under control quickly.
Doctor, thank you. Thank you very much. Still to come on The Breakfast Show for you here on Sky News. Do fines deter parents from taking their children out of school for holidays? We'll speak to a mum who says they don't, part of a majority, according to a new survey.
I'm David Blevins, and I'm Sky's senior Ireland correspondent.
It takes 60 minutes to cross the Irish Sea. It took the British monarchy a century.
I've spent 30 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace.
The political parties of Northern Ireland have reached agreement.
If there's anyone who might know how to fix Northern Ireland's devolved government, it's the American architect.
Changes in circumstance require changes in approach.
The end of the political stalemate, the start of a new chapter for Northern Ireland.
I confirm that I am willing to take up the office of First Minister. My election to the post of First Minister demonstrates the change that's happening on this island.
Catholics and Protestants on different sides, now facing the same threat.
If we both contract COVID-19 and end up in hospital, religion's nothing.
People here are adept at finding hope amid adversity. That's the spirit of a place. that punches way above its weight.
We help you understand the world with us. A toxic blue-green algae now poisoning Loch Ness. It's breaking your heart what has happened here.
It is.
This is a vital resource, a national treasure, now fighting for its very life. They are effectively surrounded by Northern Ireland, and that makes this the most unlikely of international frontiers.
If there's a hard border, I think it'll cripple the country.
Winter is coming. Welcome to Winterfell. It's an iconic location in this globally acclaimed drama.
Ophelia was the most powerful hurricane this far east in the Atlantic on record.
Sky News, the full story first.
Play Sky News.
From the Sky News Centre at 7.
Now that you're up to date, we can go into a bit more detail.
Things can change incredibly quickly.
Taken by surprise.
Have you ever known a moment like this in British politics before?
Yes.
Cheers.
We'll start with breaking news.
Let's get the latest on the ground.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better.
I say, bring it on.
With America divided and tensions running high, get ready for an election like no other.
Join our teams as we follow the campaign trail as America decides.
We will win, win, win.
Get closer to the action this US election with full reaction and analysis.
Sky News, the full story first.
Hi again, everybody. Welcome back to The Breakfast Show on Sky News. The majority of parents say fines for unauthorised absences would not deter them from taking their children on holiday during term time. A survey by the charity Parent Kind found almost 3 in 5 parents have or would take their child out of school for a holiday, with the same proportion saying the risk of a fine would not impact their decision. Let's get more, should we? Standing by Selena Diva, who took her child out of school during term time for a holiday. Hi, it's good to see you, Selena. Why did you decide to do that?
Hi. Yeah, so we've literally just got back from our holiday 2 days ago, and it was purely because of the price of holiday companies. The holiday that we've just been on only cost us $1,400 for 4 of us. But then to take the same exact holiday 2 weeks later during the school holidays, it was literally double the price. So taking our child out of school was it made sense to take them out during term time rather than taking them out during the school holidays, purely because of the price.
I think he's I'm not quite sure how old the kids are at the moment, but as they get older, would you reconsider that decision?
Yes, I would. So I've got a 4-year-old, and right now he's in reception, so he's learning just letters and numbers, and we could have done that on the plane. But I think when he's older and he's in his teenage years and he's taking his exams, I would definitely take that into consideration. However, exams are not until May next year, and we went in October. So I think even if we did want to go on a holiday, I would still take him out for a week because I don't think it would affect his education that much.
What's the school say about it?
Yeah, so I put a holiday request form in. They got back to me a week later saying that it's unauthorised, but then to expect a fine through the post.
And that's going to be between £60 and £80. That's adding to the cost of the holiday, isn't it?
Yes, it is. So it's initially £160, reduced to £80 if we pay it within 21 days. And this is the first offence, so that's why it's reduced. And it will come within 2 to 3 months. But it's still cheaper than paying double the price in term time.
And you'll pay that happily, will you, this fine?
Yes, I would 100% pay the fine because it's a lot cheaper than paying almost double the price to go in term time.
OK, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you.
What would you do about your little one? I know he's not at school yet, but when it comes to, would you take them out of school for a holiday?
I don't think so, but I can't be sure.
Okay.
I actually wasn't watching that story, Kate, so I might need to catch up.
The story is that you're going to have to pay more money now if you take your kid out of school during term time.
Oh, yes.
And that lovely lady was saying that it was worth it to her because it's much cheaper than when you're on half-term holidays.
It is a travesty that just the amount that prices surge during the summer holidays. We delayed a trip back, my half Canadian, to Canada to September. The flights were half the price. And if you're parents that are confined to school holidays, well, as you well know with your son, it does make a significant difference. But at the same time, learning is vitally important. And I'm sure every teacher would say that week missed is really detrimental in some cases.
Should I tell you what else is vitally important?
Go for it.
Diamonds. Oh, we don't have any... Oh, we were going to play Diamonds Are Forever.
No, that's so sad.
I know. Dame Shirley... Yeah, no. Dame Shirley Bassey's been flogging her jewellery.
She has, for very good reason. She's put some of her jewellery under the hammer to raise money for her charities. And some of the pieces that she's put up are very eye-catching indeed. I think we should have a look at them.
Cartier watch?
There is a Cartier watch. Can we have a look at that?
We'll find it. You keep telling me.
Well, it went under the hammer anyway, and that raised £54,976. There it is. And there was... What else did she do? There were diamonds from Elton John. I mean, you know, everyone want one of those, wouldn't they?
Yeah, it was in a ring, I think, wasn't it?
Yes, yes. I think we can have a look at that. That's a big yellow piece, just, you know, really lovely to look at. £39,000 that went for.
And the most expensive.
Incredible necklace, hey?
I think that was the one that you had your eye on, wasn't it, Gareth? You know,
that use for it, but
so she was wearing that during her first Royal Variety performance in front of the Queen, and that went for £144,000. So some really, really eye-catching pieces.
Beautiful, stunning. Yeah.
I just don't know how I'd feel about just phoning Elton up and going, you know, that gift you gave me, I've just got to auction it off tomorrow.
Well, Elton gives a lot to charity as well.
That's true.
So, you know, I'm sure he's probably, you know, that's fine. You can let that one go.
OK. Boys talking about diamonds. Who'd have thought it?
I know, I love it.
We'll see we'll see in just a second here on Sky News Station.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Morning, everybody. 9 o'clock coming up on today's programme for you. Why we could now be in store for back-to-back interest rate cuts.
Plus, tax rises or spending cuts, how the Chancellor plans to fill a £40 billion black hole.
And why, thinking of money, some diamonds are not forever. Dame Shirley Bassey giving some away.
Yeah, it's Wednesday, the 16th of October. A surprisingly bigger than expected fall in inflation to 1.7%, but what's behind it? The US gives Israel a 30-day deadline to boost aid into Gaza, or it will cut military assistance. A series of Israeli airstrikes on Beirut this morning, the first in 5 days. We'll have the latest live. A warning about the desperate state of end-of-life care on a landmark day for assisted dying laws in Parliament. When Starmer met Swift, new details emerge as Downing Street denies the tickets were a thank you for enhanced security. And a German coach for the England team, Thomas Tuchel, to be unveiled later at Wembley. Inflation's dropped lower than expected. Here's Paul. Morning.
Good morning, Kate. Yes, a welcome surprise. We thought inflation would fall. Economists thought it would fall from 2.2% in August to about 1.9%, actually down to 1.7%, so larger than expected. Why? It's largely a consequence of transport costs, by which the Office for National Statistics really mean fuel prices. Petrol and diesel, both significantly cheaper than they were a year ago. There you can see, we look at the graph there, we've come down, starting to look like quite a fall there, the very right-hand side of the screen, a long way from that mountainous peak of above 11% back in late 2022. But it's the first time that red line for inflation has been beneath the green dotted line, which is the Bank of England's target for inflation of 2%, since the spring of 2021. So it's quite a big day from that point of view. Fuel has fallen. There's a bit of... There's an impact too here from airfares. Airfare inflation is down significantly. Now, you might not think that if you tried to book a flight recently.
Absolutely not.
But it's a statistical function, as so much of these numbers are. There was a very big fall comparative to a year ago when airfares went up. So it doesn't feel like it, but inflation, remember, as we're always quick to remind people, is a measure of how fast prices are increasing, not prices falling. But it is good news, and it's good news for the Bank of England. The consequence of this is likely to be the markets certainly think almost 90% certainty now that at the next Bank of England meeting in November, at the start of the month, first week of the month it is, there will be at least a 0.25 percentage point rate cut. They think a half percentage cut, which the US Federal Reserve did, is less likely. But there's a feeling there will be a rate cut, and that's good news. Prices are falling, your mortgage might be falling too. Darren Jones, the Chief Secretary of the Treasury, has welcomed the news this morning. We can hear from him.
Well, look, it's good news for family finances that inflation has fallen below 2%. But of course, there's more work to be done to protect working people and bring stability and growth back to the economy, which is what the Chancellor and this government is doing now and in the run-up to the budget at the end of October.
Might the budget impact on whether there's going to be an interest rate cut?
I think the bank will try and... The bank will certainly say no if we ask them the question, totally independent. I think they're probably quite pleased to be making this decision the week after the budget. They've been making decisions slightly in the dark in this long period between Keir Starmer's government taking office, Rachel Reeves getting through the door of number 11, and the actual budget. I mean, the issues around the budget are many and varied. You've discussed many of them today. I think the interest around these numbers is it continues the trend of an improving economic situation. Growth is a bit better than expected. Inflation is falling. Conservatives will tell us, won't they, that this is, there was a fair wind blowing. What it doesn't change is that the public finances are in a parlous state. And talk about a black hole for 1 year, £22 billion. There's another one of just £20 billion if you want public sector budgets, departmental budgets, to rise in line with inflation. You'll find another £20 billion. if you've ruled out most taxes, as Rachel Reeves has, it's a very difficult job to see how you can... you've got a big job on to people will expect public services to be improved. That was one of the promises. We'll do that at the same time as incentivising businesses to grow.
Yeah.
You know, it's an enormously important moment.
This is what Nigel Huddleston said for the opposition.
We welcome the reduction in inflation. Of course, you know, there's a time lag to these kind of economic statistics, and this reduction is largely a result of the difficult decisions that we made when we were in power, we were in government. So the reduction is good news. It was the #1 point of the previous government's economic strategy.
So she's been telling us all about, for us going back to the budget, all of the things that she's not going to increase. Going to have to do something.
Going to have to do something, and made it difficult. Labour painted themselves into a corner. We won't raise VAT, income tax or national insurance.
For working people.
Yeah, discuss national insurance. We're on the head of a pin, I think, on that argument. But that's 75% of tax-raising powers. And as we were saying before, we heard from Nigel Huddleston there, you've got to raise significant money if you are not going to see public services face cuts. And that's, you know, interesting. On Monday at the Investment Summit, I was there, Sir Keir Starmer was there. He talked about public services needing the tough love of prudence. I did ask Rachel Reeves if there's a difference, but she's back.
Yes.
If there's a difference between prudence and austerity, you know, clearly there is, but there's an expectation, I suspect, out there that public services will be addressed. The money, as we know, has to come from somewhere.
You, Sir Keir Starmer, Sir Elton John and the King. Heady times.
Together at last.
Exactly.
Kay.
All the boys in the band back together. A series of Israeli airstrikes. Let's talk about that. They've hit Beirut this morning, the first such strikes in 5 days. It comes as the United States gives Israel 30 days to improve the humanitarian situation in Gaza or risk losing US military assistance. Let's get more, should we? Our Middle East correspondent Alistair Bunkle joining us from Jerusalem. So what is the US saying? Alistair, good morning.
Well, the United States has written from their Defense Secretary and the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, have written to two senior Israeli ministers, warning them that if more is not done to get humanitarian aid into Gaza, then the United States might restrict arms shipments to Israel. And this warning comes in a letter that the Americans say they were not going to make public, but it was leaked. The Americans have hinted via the Israelis, and so the Americans have now confirmed that they sent that letter. And let me read a part of it to you, because it is pretty scathing of Israel's attempts so far to get aid into Gaza. They say, "We are particularly concerned that recent actions by the Israeli government, including halting commercial imports, denying or impeding nearly 90% of humanitarian movements between northern and southern Gaza in September, continuing burdensome and excessive dual-use restrictions, and instituting new vetting and onerous liability and customs requirements for humanitarian staff and shipments, together with increased lawlessness and looting, are contributing to an accelerated deterioration in the conditions in Gaza." I mean, you know, that is quite a list of accusations they make against the Israeli government and what the Americans, and let's be honest, many others believe is a failure by the Israelis to get more aid into Gaza. So there is that threat. If nothing improves within 30 days, then arms shipments could be halted. But I think a lot of people will say, why has it taken 12 and a half months to make this threat? And secondly, within that 30-day period, you have the US elections, and we don't know what the outcome of that is going to be. But I think the Israeli government will calculate that if Donald Trump does win it, they'll probably have a more sympathetic US president in the White House.
OK, for now, thank you. That well-known Swiftie is at it again.
Yes, so I think one of the big problems for the government is the sort of drip that these details about what has been going on, who's had Taylor Swift tickets, which members of the cabinet have been. And now we've had confirmation, there's been lots of speculation about this, that the Prime Minister met with Taylor Swift, what was called a brush-by, 10 minutes that they met with Keir Starmer's family and Taylor Swift's mother. There he is at Taylor Swift with his wife, Victoria. We know that she got Taylor Swift got an enhanced police escort despite some reservations previously from the Met. That was, I should say, after she had cancelled gigs in Vienna over concerns about a terror threat. The reason I think that this is difficult, I mean, it's on the front pages of a whole range of papers from The Guardian to The Times today, is, as I say, I think some Labour backbench MPs I've spoken to are just annoyed with the kind of communications, the way that this has dripped out, the way that we now have more things about the Prime Minister meeting Taylor Swift, the way that this hasn't been all handled in one big go, and the kind of basic rule that should you accept hospitality from someone about which you might be making decisions.
OK, and the Conservatives said there's lots of questions to answer, as she was saying.
Yeah.
So,
and I should say Labour say that he eventually did pay for the tickets and that it was all properly declared.
OK, eventually.
Eventually.
For now, thank you. Rest of today's top stories.
Yes, let's turn our attention to the NHS, because NHS workers will now be able to anonymously report incidents of sexual misconduct in changes to protect the safety of staff. It follows a Sky News investigation which uncovered widespread sexual harassment and violence against female paramedics. NHS bosses says the problem exists across the entire health service, but they are determined to tackle it.
Well, I really hope that all of the measures that we have announced today gives people confidence that we are taking these awful behaviours and assaults seriously, and that we want people to come forward. They will be supported, they will be believed, and they will be heard.
Aircraft nut ban announcements are unlikely to be effective and may even give people a false sense of security. That's according to experts. The comments come from the aviation medical consultancy, who say flyers also shouldn't worry about the allergens in the air conditioning system. Instead, people flying with nut allergies should ask to board first so they can thoroughly clean their seat and area. Former Chief of the General Staff, General Sir Mike Jackson, has died at the age of 80. During his time, he led the British Army during the Allied invasion of Iraq in 2003, after serving in both Northern Ireland and Bosnia. The father of three was also dubbed the Prince of Darkness, owing to his gravelly voice and uncompromising style. The US has welcomed two new giant pandas which have arrived from China in what's known as panda diplomacy as part of a 10-year conservation agreement. The pandas, named as Bao Li and King Bao, left a research facility in southwestern China, have arrived at the Smithsonian's National Zoo. The pair will remain in quarantine for at least a month, and then the public will have the opportunity to see them from January. Meanwhile, twin baby pandas, also sent from China, have made their long-awaited debut at Berlin Zoo. These sister cubs were seen for the first time by the press yesterday and will welcome the public from today.
Do you think that FedEx plane always has the panda on the side, or do you think they do it specially?
Next week it'll be a lion. Just transfer the next one.
Thanks very much for the latest update. Ashish is here with us. We've been talking about palliative care, also talking about assisted dying, both in the news.
Both in the news, because today is the first time the assisted dying bill is introduced to Parliament with a view for a second reading, a debate at the end of the month. Hugely significant moment, very, very strong views on both sides. And I have to stress, a lot of people who want to talk more and learn more about the issues before they make up their minds. I've spent some time with palliative care doctors and hospice staff and patients looking at end-of-life care in this country, and there is a lot left to do to make sure people die dignified, pain-free deaths. And this is what needs to be discussed before, they say, before we start talking about introducing legalised dying in this country. Here's what they had to say.
Hi, Tim.
Tim was given just a few months to live. That was 3.5 years ago.
Let's say what, Tim.
Born with learning disabilities, he later developed cancer, and it kept returning.
Be there. Hello, Tim. It's lovely to see you.
But despite being very sick, Tim can live at home with mum Valerie because of support from his palliative care nurse, Phoebe.
This is Joe. It's really sad to see him deteriorate particularly because when I first started seeing him, he was independently mobile in his wheelchair. He would take lots of videos. He'd be super, super chatty. I'm not going to lie, I do cry quite a lot at work. Yeah, I think you're human.
Which flavour would you like?
Valerie is 82, and naturally, she's worried about the future.
I think if you speak to any parent of a child with learning disabilities, well, all those that I have known have said, I would like my child to die before me, because we've seen so many go into care, lovely people there looking after them, but then you go back a few months later, those lovely people have gone and there's somebody else there.
Would you be able to cope without the palliative care you receive?
I couldn't do this without them.
Breathing.
The quality of the country's end-of-life care system is being questioned as MPs consider legalising assisted dying. St Christopher's Hospice, where Phoebe works, neither supports or opposes a change in the law. But the hospice sector is a strong and important voice in that debate.
We've got hospices who are cutting back their services already, making frontline staff redundant because they're no longer able to fund those services. And so whether or not assisted dying is introduced by this government, we must fix the end-of-life care system in the UK.
Her catheter bag would be full of blood and they wouldn't come out.
Linda has experienced the best and worst of end-of-life care. Her mother died peacefully and comfortably at a Marie Curie hospice. But her Aunt Mary chose to die at home.
We had to buy her incontinence pads. We had to buy different creams because the deliveries weren't regular. We had to chase everyone for everything. And it's just so tiring all the time having to fight.
In the UK, we don't talk about death enough. But now, that conversation is being forced on us, and it could be one of the most important ones we ever have in our lives.
And you can see more of Ashis's special report throughout the day, of course. There's a longer piece as well this evening, 8 o'clock.
Yes.
Palliative care, apparently, we were being told by Dame Esther, is enhanced by assisted dying. That's a difficult step to get your head around.
There are very strong arguments on both sides, and some of them are true, and some of them need a little more investigation and scrutinising. Palliative care doctors, the ones I've spoken to, say they are generally concerned about what happens to the quality of palliative care where assisted dying is in place already. And those concerns were expressed in that film and from the hospice sector. It's a hugely emotive issue. What I found talking to people about this for almost a year is it's not binary. There is no right or wrong answer. There are people who have personal experiences, and those experiences will dictate their own outcomes or how they feel about it. But I've also found that there are a great number of people who have no experience of assisted dying and don't know where they stand, but understand that in the years to come, they might be forced to make some very difficult choices. So what is crucially important is in the next few weeks, we are all confronted with this very difficult subject and engage with it and really think about what's best for all of us, especially our loved ones.
OK, Bernard, thank you. Thanks very much. Big news from the world of football now. Thomas Tuchel has signed a deal to become the new England head coach and the men's team's first German boss. He'll be unveiled at Wembley at 1:30. Rob Harris is there. Hello to you, Rob. Are you surprised?
Well, the surprise is perhaps how quickly it's all been wrapped up. The start of the week, there was talk of Pep Guardiola last weekend, still Lee Carsley, whether he would get the job permanently. But the interim coach seemed to flunk his audition. So after a 3-month search, the FA have quickly done this deal with Thomas Tuchel. He's got the trophy-winning credentials that predecessor certainly didn't have, winning the Champions League in the past, titles in Germany and France as well. So that's what England will be hoping that they do get from Tuchel, someone with that track record of trophies to finally deliver the Three Lions' first title since 1966, back here on that day at the World Cup. And his mission to qualify for the World Cup in 2026 will begin in earnest next year. But of course, it's not just about the football, however important that is, about delivering results. Being England manager is also a leadership position, and how can he cope? We saw how challenging it was at times for Gareth Southgate. You can get oddities and absurdities that sort of come up from time to time, and you might get a taste of that today, Thomas Tuchel, even though he's been at Chelsea in the past. The extra level of pressure and expectation and status that being England manager can bring, because it won't just be about how he can influence the team tactically, but how he can be a face of the nation, because even some of the newspapers today are saying this job should only be done by someone who is English. But Tuchel is the third foreign manager now of the Three Lions, and they've already seen with England that a foreign manager can deliver success, because 2 years ago, Sarina Wiegman, the Dutch coach, won the Euros for the Lionesses.
OK, for now, thank you. Just want to bring you some terribly sad breaking news here on Sky. Police appealing for witnesses to a fatal collision on the M6 northbound past T-Base services. Officers called to the incident at just after 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon. Collision involved two vehicles, a Skoda and a Toyota. The driver of the Skoda, a man from the Cambridgeshire area, pronounced dead at the scene. The driver of the Toyota, a man, a woman and two children from Glasgow, all pronounced dead at the scene. A third child that was in the Toyota, presumably with parents and siblings, taken to the Royal Victoria Infirmary in Newcastle with serious injuries. The families of those involved are being supported by specially trained officers. The motorway has now reopened, but the police are appealing for witnesses. So 5 people dead, including 2 youngsters, another youngster in a serious condition after a 2-car collision on the motorway, the M6 motorway, northbound past T-Base services. If you've got any information about that, contact police. Still to come on The Breakfast Show for you. The film Donald Trump tried to get banned. We'll hear what the critics make of The Apprentice.
They lost diamonds are forever.
Or maybe they're not, as jewellery belonging to Dame Shirley Bassey is sold off at auction in Paris.
I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent.
An enormous explosion that's just come down. I think it was a monster just landed in between us.
Hundreds and hundreds of people hoping to get north, ultimately to get to the United States.
It's a border where they're not welcome, yet they keep coming.
We saw snatch squads going in, grabbing people, taking them out and putting them into trucks and taking them away.
They make about 50 kilos of fentanyl a week. It's incredibly dangerous and toxic stuff.
There's been an upsurge in deaths. The fighting between the gangs is getting more and more vicious.
Is this now all your territory?
Yeah.
The battlefield is outside the barricades, which is over there. This is much more like a normal town. It's really sending a clear message that Venezuela is eager for change.
We're being crushed. Free from wherever you get your news. We are in the middle of a forest, in a jungle really, and they're attempting to keep these men alive. This is real, hardcore emergency medicine. The information on this could bring down the entire network, not just in Iraq and Syria, but across the world. Sky News, the full story first.
Well, hundreds of thousands of people have been using the beast for years to traverse Mexico, but it is really dangerous. many people have died riding it.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Significant day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Heavy vehicle.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
Just want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty? I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
Hi again, everybody. He doesn't usually hold back, and when it comes to those involved in a new movie about his early business life, Donald Trump makes no exception. He's called them human scum and responsible for a hatchet job. In a moment, we'll get the take of Tory Brazier, film critic for the Metro, but first, this report from Katie Spencer.
Human scum is how Donald Trump has referred to the team behind The Apprentice. It stars on the red carpet at the London Film Festival to promote a story which the former president says is fake.
Cheese balls over here.
Sebastian Stan plays the man himself in The Apprentice, a story which depicts the presidential candidate's rise as a New York property developer back in the 70s, mentored by notorious lawyer Roy Cohen, who it's claimed taught him to deny everything and always claim victory.
The first rule is attack, attack, attack.
You can draw a line from Roy Cohen straight to all of this hate speech. In a way, once you start to see the playbook and you realize what these tactics are, you see that it permeates literally everything that he does.
I'll give you $50,000 now, like a signing bonus.
Not only does it show the former president having cosmetic surgery and popping diet pills, most controversially, it depicts him raping his first wife, Ivana, based on an assault detailed in her divorce deposition, a claim she recanted years later, vehemently denied by Trump.
We wouldn't be here if the film hadn't been, vetted up, down, left, right, and sideways with lawyers. To me, he might have to check his own memory because I think he's forgetting his own life. And I'm not sure how reassuring that is if you're running for president.
In a 1am rant on his Truth Social app on Monday, fake and classless was how Donald Trump described this film, calling it a cheap, defamatory and politically disgusting hatchet job aimed at thwarting his re-election attempts.
I do understand that he can be very frustrated and, he feels sort of misunderstood. You're not going to get more love and respect if you're talking about people eating cats and dogs.
Released just weeks before America goes to the polls, rather than sway voters, so far poor box office numbers in the US would indicate an element of Trump fatigue from cinema goers. Nonetheless, it would seem the very idea of people watching him undergo things like liposuction certainly seems to have got under Donald Trump's skin. Katie Spencer, Sky News.
What's his big problem with it, Tori?
Well, I think he hasn't seen it, so...
So how does he know?
Exactly. He's just such a defensive person that he's immediately leaping in. Now, I'm not going to say there aren't things he'll have problems with, but, this was based on a book that was written about him by Harry Hurt III in the 90s, Lost Tycoon, and these aren't things people don't know about.
Yeah, it's just when it's on the big screen, it probably starts to hit home. Is it more about him, or is it more about Roy Cohen?
I'd say it's slightly more about him, but Roy Cohen is a really big part in the film because you're really seeing Donald Trump being crafted by the person that taught him there's two people in the world, killers and losers, and that your mode of anything should be attack, attack, attack. So all of these things that we've known Donald Trump to, how he acts, is very much being crafted in this film by Roy Cohen, who's a very aggressive lawyer.
How good is it?
I really enjoyed it. I think it's great. I don't think it's exactly what people expect. It's not flattering. It's not a hatchet job. And actually, I have to say, the performances are brilliant, particularly Sebastian Stan, who doesn't go crazy on the impersonation. It's subtle, but it works.
Of Donald Trump?
Yes, of Donald Trump. And Jeremy Strong as Roy Cohn is something else.
OK. It's not done well at the US box office so far, though, has it?
No, I mean, I think it's just had such a hard time being released. I saw it at Cannes, and when they were there, they were presenting it, they seemed confident, but, you know, I've learned since, you know, behind the scenes, things were going wrong, they couldn't get a distributor. I'm not sure it was ever going to be a box office smash in the US, but, you know, potentially an international audience, a UK audience might come out for it, and I mean, I think they should.
What era is it dealing with?
So it's the 70s and 80s predominantly, so it's young Trump. I think that helps. You can sort of be a little removed from everything that's in the news now about him and sort of focus on how he came to be.
But how many stars would you give it?
I gave it 4.
Did you? Oh, amazing. Do you think there will be other movies? Because this was the 70s and 80s. A lot's happened since then.
Yes. Well, considering how difficult it was for this to get made, it'd probably be really hard to get anything done any more recent, but you know, never say never.
Sure, it's good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. So 4 stars, there you go. Still to come on The Breakfast Show for you. Campaigners welcome the new bill on assisted dying. We'll hear this family story after the break. Hello again. Just confirmation from the FA at England, as they call themselves, on Twitter. Thomas Tuchel, our Three Lions head coach from 2025. There you go. That's what they are saying. There will be a news conference a little bit later on today, but confirmation that Thomas Tuchel is the new head coach for the Three Lions.
Yes, taking on after Gareth Southgate after the Euros, hey? 18 months, first established by Sky Sports Germany, our colleagues over there, and now confirmed by Team FA.
A last-minute choice, apparently, after somebody, mentioning no names, messed up his interview earlier on in the week. So, well, that's what the rumours suggest. So, as a result, Thomas Tuchel, our Three Lions head coach from 2025. That's what at England, a.k.a. the FA, are saying on Twitter just now.
In the meantime, let's bring you some of our other top stories this morning, shall we? 5 people, including 2 children, have died in a car crash on the M6 motorway. UK inflation has dropped to 1.7% in September, down 0.5% from August. It's the first time the rate has fallen below the 2% target set by the Bank of England in over 3 years. The fall much bigger than expected. A series of Israeli airstrikes have hit Beirut this morning. This is the live image of the city, the first such strikes in 5 days. It comes as the United States has given Israel 30 days to improve the humanitarian situation in Gaza or risk losing US military assistance.
Proposals to give people with terminal illnesses the right to choose to end their lives are being introduced in Parliament today. The assisted dying bill will be formally put forward in the House of Commons by Labour MP Kim Leadbeater. Earlier, I spoke with broadcaster Dame Esther Ranson, who's been diagnosed with terminal lung cancer. She said people should have the choice regardless of their faith.
I think everybody has a right to their own religious belief. That's what it means to live in our democracy. We believe in religious freedom. But I don't believe that being an archbishop gives you the right to dictate terms to someone who doesn't share your religious beliefs. And I think the Archbishop of Westminster went too far when he wrote a letter which had to be read aloud in every Catholic pulpit, instructing Catholics to write to their own MP opposing a change in the law.
On the other side of the argument, Baroness Elora Finlay says the focus should be on a stronger support system.
Hospices only get about 37% of their funding from the NHS. All the rest depends on charitable giving. So really, we have to say, surely care of people who are very seriously ill and who may hear a devastating diagnosis needs to be there. We need to change and get that right. We need to have a system whereby everybody's supported, and we need to have a system whereby people, whenever they feel that they're in crisis, actually can get help rather than feel that they're languishing or that they have to go to an emergency department.
Joining me now is Lauren Nicklinson. Her father, Tony, suffered from locked-in syndrome, as you'll remember, after being paralysed by a stroke in 2005. He died in 2012 after refusing food, not long after losing his High Court battle to allow doctors to end his life. Lauren is with us now. It's a very emotive subject for everyone, not least you, Lauren. How would your dad feel about the progress that has been made on this subject?
I think he'd be pleased to hear that something was finally happening in Parliament, but I also think he'd be incredibly frustrated that a lot of the discussion to date has been around supporting people with terminal illness. He always felt that the terminally ill were in some sense lucky because they knew that at some point, mostly soon, they would have a way out. Dad didn't have that way out. He, obviously ultimately died after the High Court battle, but that was because he refused medical treatment and food and drink. If he hadn't refused that, he would have lived, and he could have lived for years and years. So I think ultimately he would have been very frustrated at how painfully slow progress has actually been. So the assisted dying legislation that is being put before the House of Commons, started to be put before the House of Commons today, if it does become law, would that have been something that would benefit people like your father, or still not? No. So as far as I'm aware, it's likely to support those with terminal illness, and Dad wasn't terminally ill. He was simply, in some respects, disabled. He was paralysed with the neck down, and he couldn't speak, and he was offered all the palliative care that was available on the NHS and through charitable services. He had as much support as he could have asked for, and he tried everything, but for him, it just wasn't enough. For him, it did not make his life worth living. And his autonomy, his ability to choose was taken away from him, and that's all that we've ever been campaigning for, was his right to choose.
You're one of the signatories on a letter calling Kim Leadbeater, who's putting this before the House of Commons, to include the words "those suffering unbearably," as well as those who are coming to the end of their lives and suffering in that fashion. Tell me more about that and what reaction you've had.
So I've myself and my mum and my sister, we've all signed this letter that's been coordinated by My Death, My Decision, and it's all around encouraging MPs, politicians, anyone within the system to think much more broadly than the terminally ill when it comes to discussing this bill in Parliament. We want them to consider the needs and the rights of people with incurable and unbearable suffering. So people like Dad. Dad was not terminally ill, and there are numbers of people within this country who are still in his position. And we just want them to think much more broadly, think much more bravely. This is the chance to get it right for everyone in society who has this need, not just those who have got terminal illness. The response has been really positive. I don't know the stats relating to polls, but I do know that when you talk to people, they want this. There is support for this. There is support and a need for this bill to support people with incurable and unbearable suffering.
What kind of safeguards do you think should be put in place to protect people from being coerced?
Absolutely support the need for safeguards. This should not be easy. It should be incredibly heavily regulated. We aren't suggesting it's a case of popping down to your GP, walking out, and there you go. It should be very difficult, whether or not it includes High Court judges or a panel of various professionals and legal and safeguarding minds. It should be difficult, and it should be a lengthy process to make sure that people who request it actually want it and that they appreciate what it is they're asking for. And to support and keep safe those people who need it. I agree that those people do exist, but it should be possible. I find it hard to believe that in our society we haven't got the bright minds who can devise this system, keeping people safe who need it, but also supporting those people like Dad who also need that support and need that help to end a life that they don't feel is worth living and is utterly unbearable.
Thank you for taking the time to join us. How have you been getting on since your dad left us?
Good, as well as can be expected. We spent so many years talking about Dad's death, and it happened, and it did happen quickly. It does knock the wind out of you, but it's been 12 years now. My mum's got grandchildren, 4 wonderful grandchildren, and we're all happy and we're healthy, but we think about Dad, and this is so important. I need his pain to have meaning, and I will pursue this for as long as I possibly can.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. England's men have a new manager football. The FA has just confirmed it's Thomas Tuchel. Let's get more, should we? Rob is at Wembley. Hi, Rob. A news conference coming?
Yes, we'll be hearing from Thomas Tuchel later today. The Football Association have confirmed that Thomas Tuchel will be the new England men's manager starting in 2025, leading that mission to qualify for the 2026 World Cup and ultimately win it. We have discovered some detail now from the FA. They say they actually wrapped up a deal with Tuchel at the start of last week when it was approved by the FA board, and they didn't want to disrupt the international break that's just taken place by announcing it before then. The FA say it was an extensive search, that they interviewed several candidates after Gareth Southgate decided to leave following the Euros in the summer. Most importantly, perhaps for many, wanted to hear what does Thomas Tuchel himself have to say, first of all, in this FA statement that they have put out. And in it, the German says, "I am very proud to have been given the honour of leading the England team. I have long felt a personal connection to the game in this country, and this has given me some incredible moments already." That's referring to his Champions League win with Chelsea a couple of years ago. Tuchel continues in his statement, "To have the chance to represent England is a huge privilege, and the opportunity to work with this special and talented group of players is very exciting." Well, he's already looking ahead to 2026, that World Cup. The FA's chief executive, Mark Bullingham, talking about how impressive Thomas Tuchel was and the qualities that he has. He'll be assisted by a name that might not be familiar to many, Anthony Barry, an English coach who's been with Tuchel in the past, Bayern Munich in particular. He's worked with Portugal and Belgium and national team roles as well. But For now, it will be still Lee Carsley who will be managing England in the Nations League games next month, and then Thomas Tuchel at the start of 2025 will become England's third foreign manager of the men's national team.
OK, for now, thank you. To the US now, where officials in Georgia say a record number of voters have already cast their ballot for next month's election. It's one of the key battleground states where Donald Trump and Kamala Harris have been focusing their efforts ahead of November the 5th. Let me tell you more about it. Another key state will be Michigan, where both candidates will be hoping to pick up the support of undecided voters. As part of his campaign trail, Donald Trump visited a church in Detroit in June to woo voters in the city with the highest black population in the US. Our US correspondent Mark Stone has this report.
This street tells the biggest story.
There isn't much grand about Detroit's Grand River Avenue. Not along this part, at least. North of gentrified downtown is uptown, forgotten.
What you'll see down Grand River is, I mean, it's so bad. It's completely desolate. All black people. And then as soon as you hit downtown, the racial dynamics change. That's our situation, look.
Lorenzo Sewell has been a local pastor here for the last few years.
So when President Trump said Detroit needs help, this is it. Look, right here.
A few days ago, Barack Obama, spooked by the polls clearly, had this.
We have not yet seen the same kinds of energy and turnout in all quarters that seems to be more pronounced with the brothers.
Brothers, help the black woman. I was really offended by it. What did he do for black people? It's almost like they want to seduce us with Obama to say, oh, President Obama, now you got to vote. Now you got to vote for Vice President Harris. Do they think we don't have political prowess? We may be poor and black, but that doesn't mean we're stupid. President Trump is there. I'm here.
It was back in June when Lorenzo was drawn to Donald Trump, the former president praying with him here at the church.
President Obama never came to the hood, so to speak, right? President Joe Biden, he went to the big NAACP dinner, but he never came to the hood. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Pastor.
There are plenty within his orbit who are openly racist. And he encourages that with his language, with his rhetoric, all the time.
Of course there are things that President Trump says that I don't like because I'm a Christian, right? I'd prefer them to say it a different way. Maybe people don't like him, but the world was stable when he was around. Gas was cheaper. I know that my bills were cheaper. Life was better under President Trump. Everybody knows it.
Of course, hardly everybody. Detroit is a Democratic city by a wide margin. But in a key swing state, if Donald Trump can pull just a few, or if they don't vote at all, then Michigan could well be his.
And so she's saying...
Further down Grand River Avenue, an evening gathering organised by a Democratic Party in a state of angst. Black Men for Harris is the tag.
I think most black men in America are determining not do they want to vote for Kamala or Trump, it's do they want to vote for the vice president or stay home?
When you look at Donald Trump, again, you find a lot of platitudes and generalities. And there is more concrete policy with Kamala.
It's imperative that we win Michigan at all costs. And there's really only one choice.
And that is the nub of it. Huge jeopardy in the tightest of races and with almost no time to change minds. Mark Stone, Sky News in Detroit.
Let's find out what Wilf's up to, what's caught his eye. I'm guessing inflation's right up there for you, Wilf. Morning.
Inflation, New England manager. It's a very tough choice as to which thrills me more. But let's start with the inflation. 1.7%. The forecast was 1.9%. The last month was 2.2%. So a lot better than expected. The core inflation also below forecast, but still at 3.2. So there'll be some limits to the extent to which the Bank of England cuts rates. So the expectation is, of course, that they will do so now at the next meeting in November, possibly also in December. We'll discuss all of that with Mohamed El-Arian at 10:30. 9:30. We'll also be building up, of course, to that press conference at 1:30. Thomas Tuchel, the New England manager, will be discussing that at 10:45. And, of course, building up to PMQs at midday, which I'm rather looking forward to. It's as if Rishi Sunak's kind of been liberated when he sat down for PMQs last week, and lots to discuss, particularly with Taylor Swift Gate and, of course, prospects of what will or won't happen in the budget coming up.
I love it when a Frost says Watergate or Taylor Swift Gate. Anything with gate at the end takes me right back there.
Well, exactly. But that, you know, it's obviously linked to Dad with that set of interviews. But really, we should be giving credit to Woodward and Bernstein for Watergate becoming a story in the first place.
I'm going with Sir David all day long. Thanks very much. We'll see you at 10. Thank you.
Thank you.